Chapter 635. Gaokao Yila. Streamer, do you want to cover your eyes with a coarse cloth to block the light? It's so annoying. In ancient times, there were no sunglasses or protective glasses. The ultraviolet rays reflected from the snow will harm the eyes. It's easy to get snow blindness. Little angels, if the person above didn't remind me, I would have forgotten about this. You must be careful of snow blindness. Let's get together. Please, we're at war now. Whether we can survive is still a problem. What's a pair of eyes worth? Jiang Pengji turned off the bullet screen in the streaming room and turned the screen to the smallest size to avoid distraction. Dian Yen was beside her. Because he was nervous, his voice sounded a little rough. My lord, could it be a trap? He saw that there were only a few soldiers on the city gate. They were too lax. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Do you think everyone is like me, your lord? When I run the army, I issue orders repeatedly. Those who disobey will be dealt with according to military law. Those who slack and play tricks have to think twice. The Red Lotus group is different. Discipline is lax. Now that most of the elites have been transferred away, the remaining people think that they have nothing to worry about. Naturally, they won't take extra precautions. It's such a cold day. Who wants to be cold? They'll slack if they can. If the guards on the city gate assumed a solemn stance, Jiang Pengji would be worried that there would be an ambush. Dian Yen nodded thoughtfully. Looking at the city gate, Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes dangerously. She said, I really don't like this city gate. Dian Yen didn't understand. Weren't all the city gates the same? Why was there one that didn't like it? Jiang Pengji said, Dian Yen, lead the soldiers to cover me. Now we have to break into the city as fast as possible. I have a good idea. Dian Yen didn't ask what Jiang Pengji's idea was. He only needed to do what he was supposed to do. My lord, please rest assured. Jiang Pengji nodded. She looked down at the long spear in her hand. It was too thin and too long. She turned her head to look at Dian Yan's waist. She reached out and said, Lend me your 2 big axes. Dian Yen was tall and strong. He had great strength. He especially liked to use such heavy weapons during battles. With one swing of the axe, he could split a person from the top of his skull to his pelvis. The scene was bloody and violent. Every time he came back from a battle, he looked like he had been fished out from a pool of blood. Hearing that Jiang Pengji wanted to borrow his weapon, it wasn't that Dian Yen was unwilling, but, My lord, these 2 axes are too heavy, I'm afraid. Dian Yen had not finished his words when his eyes widened so much that they were about to pop out. The 2 axes were specially made and weighed nearly 50 kilograms, but they were as light as goose feathers in Jiang Pengji's hands. She did not seem to be straining at all. Every time Dian Yen thought he had a good understanding of his lord's combat abilities, she would always be able to break his record. The weight is quite comfortable, she pondered for a moment, then her lips curled into a faint smile. She looked at the city gate with malice and interest. At that moment, seeing Jiang Pengji holding 2 axes in her hands, the audience in the streaming room was stirred up again, and the bullet screen was filled with comments. Cola. Yesterday I saw a young general in red and silver armor, and today it's a lowly with 2 axes? Lao Ciji Lianming. The host's body is already 17 or 18 years old. Lolita? Have you ever seen such an old Lolita? In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma. There's nothing wrong with an old lowly. Gue Kai Guo Fengxiu. I've already moved the bench and melon seeds and drinks. I'm sitting down to watch the host's heroic battle. Boss Chow. TSK, the commenter above, you really have a heavy taste. People will really die when the host goes to war. Faced with bloody corpses, large and small intestines flowing out of the abdominal cavity, spleens, accumulated feces, and crushed brains, are you sure you can eat melon seeds and drinks? Thinking of Boss Chow's bullet screen, a similar scene involuntarily appeared in his mind, and he almost vomited. Jiang Pengji really wanted to cause trouble. At present, it was not clear about the specific garrison situation in Jinmen district, so Jiang Pengji did not dare to be careless. In order to end the battle quickly, she could only choose to explode and shatter the Red Lotus group's momentum with a thunderous attack. She would use the fastest speed to take down Jinmen district. In this way she had to cause trouble. Yang Si, who was protected at the back, looked in the direction of the city gate from afar. He did not know whether Jiang Pengji would directly set up a battle formation to attack or launch a sneak attack. He pondered in his heart. There was already movement from the soldiers in front. No. What does my lord want to do? Yangxi almost screamed because he saw Jiang Pengji turn over and get on Little White's back. A row of soldiers advanced in an orderly manner. Because of the snow, the sunlight, and the white cloth draped over Jiang Pengji's body, the soldiers on the city gate did not immediately discover her traces. The soldiers of the Red Lotus group hid under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. Their clothes were not uniform. Some of them wore very thick clothes, while others were very thin. They curled up and shivered with their backs straight. The only thing they had in common was that they were all older, and their physical strength was not as good as that of the younger generation. Oh my God, it's so cold! He opened his mouth and exhaled a breath of white air. The hot air that he had painstakingly held back escaped again. Stop talking. The more you talk, the colder it gets. If you have the energy to talk, why don't you shake a little more? If you can't do it, pray to the gods. I think it's a little useful. In this era, ordinary people relied on walking to get around. Did they rely on shaking to keep warm? As for hot water pots, they did not exist. They were just a group of old, weak, and disabled soldiers. It was good enough that they could survive in this world. How could they dare to ask for more? The veterans guarding the city gate huddled together to keep warm. They barely had some warmth. In a world of ice and snow, they did not have enough clothes to keep out the cold. When guarding the city during the day, they just sent 1 or 2 people to stand guard. The others huddled under the pilasters to take shelter from the wind. They huddled together to keep warm. When the people on guard could not stand it anymore, they would take turns to do it. At this time, someone complained, "I wasn't on duty today. I really don't know what's gotten into the higher-ups. They transferred everyone away and made me the scapegoat." You're not the only one who's unlucky. Stop talking. It's the chief's order to transfer people away. They've gone to eradicate the heretics. Heretics? Who's the heretic? Who else can it be? Lu Shi from next door. If the gods say he's a heretic, then he's a heretic, a demon who brings disaster to the world. Lu Shi? Almost everyone in the north knew this name. It was the same for the people of Chengde County. Most of them made a living by mining coal, but in the current world, the people could not even afford food. Who would buy coal? No one bought coal, which meant that many people who dug coal for a living would lose their livelihood. They could not even feed their families. In the past 2 years, Jiang Pengji had repeatedly purchased large amounts of coal from Chengde County. When the Red Lotus Group and Jiang Pengji had not completely fallen out, she had taken care of the business in Chengde County and provided for many people. As for the topic of heretics and demons, most people agreed with the crusade. Only a small group of people remained silent. At this time, someone looked up at the sky and found many dark spots in the sky. He raised his hand and pointed. What's that? Chapter 636. Enemy attack, enemy. A wave of arrows fell from the sky and landed behind the battlements. The voices of the gate guards stopped abruptly, and they let out a soft whimper. Their half-standing bodies collapsed with a loud crash, but the rain of arrows was still falling. Soon, the fallen corpses were pierced into hedgehogs. Dark red blood flowed out of their bodies and seeped into the stone bricks of the city wall, dampening the ground. A nauseating sweet and fishy smell filled the air. After the first wave of arrows, everyone, regardless of whether they were standing or sitting on the ground, was on high alert. How was this possible? Why were there enemies? Someone was shot in the arm by an arrow. He clung tightly to the base of the battlements, holding a wooden shield in his hand, and quietly poked his head out. It would have been better if they hadn't seen it, but once they saw it, they were almost scared out of their wits. Beads of cold sweat broke out on their backs. The snow under the city wall was thick. At first glance it seemed nothing, but when they looked closely, they could see something wriggling quickly on the snow, like a swarm of ants surging toward the city wall. When they got closer and looked again, it was clear that there were countless enemies. Who were they? Where did they come from? The rain of arrows continued to fall from the sky. The Red Lotus group was scared out of their wits. They didn't even realize that the enemies under the city wall didn't carry any siege equipment. As long as they defended against the rain of arrows and organized a wave of counterattacks, they might be able to survive a little longer. However, they were already stunned by this sudden wave of attacks. Not to mention organizing a counterattack, It was already good enough that no one stepped on them. Some soldiers hurriedly picked up the weapons that had been placed aside and tried to shoot arrows down the city wall. More people covered their heads and scurried away. Dian Yan watched Jiang Pengji ride away and secretly gritted his teeth. He ordered the soldiers to continue advancing down the city wall while continuing to shoot arrows. Cover the Lord. Yang Si, who was at the back, saw Jiang Pengji's figure that had shrunk to a small dot. He was so scared that he almost fell into the snow. Even if she was the commander of the vanguard battalion, who would act so willfully and recklessly like her? Yang Si's heart was in his throat. He almost forgot how to breathe. He stared ahead without blinking. Even though his eyes were a little sore from staring, he still didn't dare to blink. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji would die on the battlefield, in the blink of an eye. The current situation was much more thrilling than yesterday's skirmish. Just the height of the two city walls was not on the same level. Yesterday, the small city was only slightly more than 20 feet high. His lord could climb the city wall with her coquettish movements. What about today? How was the lord going to get up the city wall that was 30 feet high? Jiang Pengji had only climbed halfway. Perhaps she would be shot into a hedgehog by the Red Lotus group on the city wall. At this moment, he finally understood Wei Si's sadness. With such a carefree and worrisome lord, the officials were either worried sick or scared out of their wits. Yang Si felt that his lifespan would be halved if he were to go through 2 more rounds like this. It would be difficult for him to die of old age. The viewers in the live stream also felt the same thrill as him. Yang Si was holding the line at the rear. His eyesight was limited, and he could only see Jiang Pengji's figure turning into a blurry red and white dot. However, it was different for the audience in the streaming room. Their perspective followed Jiang Pengji's movements. How could that feeling be described as pleasurable? It was even more exciting than watching a 3D movie. If their faces were closer to the screen, it felt like those arrows would fly out of the screen and pierce through their brains. Jin Tiancheng show. I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Streamer, be careful. Chongda Jibukeguo. F*CK, that arrow just now was too thrilling. If it wasn't for the streamer's quick reaction, wouldn't her body have been pierced? I still need to work hard this month. I'm trembling. Even time travel is so dangerous now? Henceforth Tiantian Sigging. I'm scared to death. I estimate that pair of broad axes must weigh more than 50 kilograms, right? How strong is the streamer? She looks so relaxed. If it wasn't for the fact that it's impossible for the streaming room to be fake, I would have thought that they're imitations. The viewers couldn't be blamed for their doubts. Jiang Pengji could wield the spear so fast that it left after images, but it was too much for her to wield a pair of long axes so fast that they left after images. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji had already turned off the bullet screen. Otherwise, the overwhelming and colorful bullet screen would have drowned her vision. With Dian Yan supporting her from the rear, there were very few arrows that flew down from the city wall. Relying on Little White's speed and explosive power, Jiang Pengji seemed to be in danger, but in fact, she perfectly avoided all the cold arrows with hidden killing intent. She approached the city wall without any danger. Yang Si was so anxious that he gritted his teeth. The height of the city wall of Jinmen County was different from that of the small town yesterday. How could she climb up? In his anxiety, Yang Si unconsciously clenched his fists. His nails were deeply embedded into his flesh, leaving a few nail marks on his palm. Compared to his worries, the viewers in the streaming room were mostly watching the show. Zwizen Beishijing. It's coming, the streamer's ultimate skill of jumping on the wall in the air. Don't blink. Qing Shan Weishue Bai 2. Streamer, begin your performance. However, to everyone's surprise, Jiang Pengji didn't pull out a rope or anything else at all. She was less than 20 meters away from the city gate. The muscles in her right arm suddenly swelled and accumulated strength. Her arm was bent like a bow, and the handle of the axe was thrown out by her. Her calm face had a hint of ferocity. In the next moment, a loud rumbling sound came from the city gate. The long axe was deeply embedded in the city gate. The entire body of the axe was completely submerged. Like a spider web, cracks spread in all directions with the long axe as the center, and a thin layer of ash spread out. The entire city gate trembled. She threw it with too much strength. Little White raised its hooves high. Its body was almost perpendicular to the ground. It looked up to the sky and let out a roar. Jiang Pengji had expected this. She tightened her grip on the horse's belly and grabbed the reins with the other hand. It was steady and steady. It had no intention of being thrown off. Little White took advantage of this to offset the force of its forward charge. Its raised hooves fell heavily again. In an instant, the entire streaming room was quiet. There was a momentary vacuum in the bullet screen. Jiang Pengji's chest rose and fell violently. Her fair cheeks were a little flushed. She raised another long axe high and shouted loudly. "Everyone, attack! Defeat them!" Dian Yen held back the surging blood in his chest and ordered, "Attack the city!" At his command, the soldiers quickened their pace, and the rain of arrows became more concentrated. In Jinmen County, the Red Lotus Group members who stayed behind to guard the city were already panicking and at a loss when they received the news that the enemy was attacking the city. "Guard the city gate. We can't let them in!" A member of the Red Lotus Group roared. Only then did the panicking Red Lotus army calm down a little and mechanically defend the city gate. As long as they held the city gate and resisted the enemies outside, they might be able to wait for reinforcements. That was what many people thought. Dozens of soldiers blocked the city gate, for fear that Jiang Pengji would use the siege logs to hit the city gate. In fact, apart from weapons, Jiang Pengji did not carry any siege or defense equipment. She herself was the strongest siege murderess aura. The people of the Red Lotus Group were terrified when they saw the shiny axe piercing through the top of the city gate. However, in the next instant, an even more horrifying scene occurred. Chapter 637. Dozens of members of the Red Lotus Group desperately pressed against the city wall. Because of the commotion caused by the axe, the skin of the wall and sand fell from above their heads. Now that the weather was freezing, they couldn't exert their full strength at all. They pressed against the city wall with both hands, feeling as if they were touching a large block of ice. "Hold on a little longer, we can't let the thieves outside rush in." As soon as the voice of the small leader fell, dozens of people felt an unparalleled force coming from the city gate. It was as if a mountain was collapsing and pressing down on them. In the next moment, the city gate, which already had huge cracks on it, suddenly opened wide with a bang. The people behind the city gate squeezed together, almost having the illusion that their intestines had been squeezed out of their throats. One by one they fell down. Before they could react, a snow-white figure galloped past like lightning, accompanied by the clattering of hooves. A gust of wind blew past. With a slash of the long axe, a head flew up, leaving behind a corpse whose body temperature had not yet dropped. As Jiang Pengji rushed into the city gate, the soldiers behind her were greatly encouraged. Their morale rose again and again, and their battle cries shook the heavens. "Kill!" Dian Yen didn't have the two long axes that he carried with him, so he randomly found a spear to replace them. He led the soldiers and rushed into the city wall with Jiang Pengji. Yang Si felt as if he had just taken the steepest roller coaster and was forced to bungee jump. His heart was thumping violently. When he heard the soldiers beside him ask him if they should coordinate with the attack, Yang Si trembled violently and his mind became clear. "Charge! Coordinate with the Lord!" Yang Si excitedly pulled out the scholar's sword that was used as a decoration at his waist. He was so excited that he almost bit his tongue. The city gate had been breached. The members of the Red Lotus Group who were resisting at the city gate were all killed by Dian Yen, who rushed in after them. The reinforcements who rushed over were no match for them at all. They were completely crushed almost immediately. At one point, there was only the sound of fighting and the scene of blood splattering. Jiang Pengji rode on the back of the little white horse. Not only was she fast, but the long axe in her hand was like the sole hook axe in the hands of the King of Hell. With one swing of the axe, very few people died with a whole corpse. Even if they didn't die, Little White would follow up with a hoof and crush their sternum. Those who died on the spot were too numerous to count. Little White rarely cooperated with Jiang Pengji, but it was full of intelligence. Its performance was not any weaker than White's. It was not the slightest bit timid and shy like it usually was. It stepped on people cleanly and efficiently. If someone tried to raise their hand to stop it, it would crush their arm and sternum together. The soldiers of the Red Lotus Group in Jinmen County were utterly defeated. They fled in all directions like headless flies. Some people had even just gotten out of bed, their eyes wide open. They couldn't believe that Jinmen County had changed hands so easily. "Why is it so noisy outside?" someone asked doubtfully. After the military forces in Jinmen County had been transferred away, the number of people had decreased by a lot. Now that it was winter, The people were unwilling to go out, so the streets were quiet. Now that it had suddenly become lively, the bustling noise was astonishing. However, when he listened carefully, he realized that something was wrong. How was that the sound of excitement and jubilation? It was clearly the sound of shouting to kill, beating, and howling like wolves. Is there a war outside? Can't you let people sleep? What's with all the noise? Some people with bad tempers began to roar at the source of the noise. Seeing that it was not working, they went straight back to the house with their kitchen knives in an attempt to intimidate the people. However, before they could step out of the fence, a man covered in blood rushed in from the corner of the street and fell to the ground, forming a pool of blood. Seeing this scene, the man was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He fell to the ground, trembling, then turned around and crawled back into the house. It was so scary. They attacked all the way to the center of Jinmen County with irresistible force. Everywhere they passed, there was almost no resistance. The soldiers on Jiang Pengji's side were all well trained. They trained continuously throughout the year. Large-scale training was concentrated in midsummer and cold winter. They wore the same armor and held standard weapons. They cooperated with each other in combat, forming groups of 3 to 5 people. On the other hand, the Red Lotus group was full of people dressed in rags. Just the weather alone could defeat them, let alone the others. It was difficult for the old, weak, sick, and disabled to move. How could they pick up weapons and fight against the enemy? The other members of the Red Lotus group, who had rushed over after hearing the noise, were so scared that their legs turned to jelly. They could not summon the slightest will to fight. They laid down their weapons and surrendered, their faces ashen. Many people did not even know that Jinmen County had changed hands overnight. If the streets had not been cleaned of blood and broken limbs, who would have thought that a siege had broken out in the seemingly peaceful Jinmen County not long ago? Yang Si could not think of another word to describe this battle other than fast. The soldiers strangled the enemy and defeated the momentum of the Red Lotus group's garrison, making them unable to summon the will to fight. Then, they shouted that those who surrendered would not be killed. Jiang Pengji was a warlike person, but she was not a murderous person. Enemies who no longer had the will to fight were not worth her killing at all. She shook off the blood and minced meat on the axe and turned over to dismount. Little White. Well done. I'll get someone to prepare the best food for you when we get back. Jiang Pengji stroked Little White's mane. It snorted and rubbed against her palm, acting like a spoiled child in a docile manner. Because of Jiang Pengji's violent opening of the way, Little White's snow-white fur had been dyed scarlet, which added a bit of heroic spirit. Yang Si laid out the layout and commanded. Dian Yen cleaned up the stubborn enemies and captives. Jiang Pengji also charged in the middle of the vanguard battalion. When the sun rose above their heads, it was already noon. Jiang Pengji leaned against Little White's side. She raised her hand and twisted the sleeves and hem of her clothes under her armor. Thick blood was squeezed out and dripped to the ground. It was clearly a bloody, terrifying and horrifying scene, but she did it very naturally, as if she was wringing rainwater instead of human blood. My lord! A call came from afar. Jiang Pengji looked up and saw Yang Si stagger and fall off the back of the date-red horse. Jiang Pengji glanced at the scholar's sword at Yang Si's waist. It was originally only used for decoration, a good-looking ornament, but at that moment, it was permeated with the smell of blood. It was obvious that it had also seen blood. When she looked at Yang Si's face, which contained hidden excitement, her expression softened a little. Are you okay? The battlefield is too chaotic. How dare you run around? Yang Si's job was mental work. The fighting and killing could be left to the martial arts. If anything happened to Yang Si, the team, which was already short of people, would be even more lacking. Jinmen District had already been conquered. There would be many things to be busy with in the future. They could not afford to lose manpower at this time. Yang Si did not know Jiang Pengji's thoughts. He thought that she was concerned about him, and his heart suddenly warmed up. Just now, he called her lord, willingly. Thank you for your concern, my lord. I'm fine. Other than the pain in his thighs from riding the horse, he was fine. He had also experienced the addiction of charging and breaking through enemy lines. The gentleman's martial arts that he had learned in the past were not useless. Jiang Pengji's voice was calm. Has the battlefield been cleaned up? How many wounded are there? How many captives? Did anyone take the opportunity to cause trouble? Chapter 638. Jiang Pengji's side had the upper hand, but as the attacking party without any siege equipment, it was already very good to have such an outcome. She said, "Now that the weather is cold, the corpses won't rot easily. Collect the corpses of the soldiers and send them back." According to the customs of war, the corpses of soldiers were usually disposed of on the spot. Firstly, there were too many corpses, and it was not easy to move them. Secondly, the weather was not good, so it was difficult to preserve the corpses. There were many accidents during the march, so it was inconvenient to bring the corpses along. However, the weather was cold, and the corpses would not rot so easily. Jiang Pengji planned to send them back to their hometown instead of burying them in a foreign land. Yang Xi's eyes widened slightly, as if he was surprised by Jiang Pengji's decision. After a while he said in a low voice, "Yes." The situation in Jinmen district was far poorer than Jiang Pengji had imagined. The houses were dilapidated and low, and the doors of every household were tightly shut. Occasionally, there would be people looking out through the crack in the door. If Jiang Pengji's gaze swept over them, they would immediately shrink their heads back. Jiang Pengji formulated a strict military order. The troops were not allowed to disturb the people during battles. If they violated the order, they would be punished according to military law. Let the soldiers rest for a while, eat something, and recover their strength. We will go back and act according to plan. Jiang Pengji heaved a sigh of relief and thought about the battle plan she had formulated. Yang Xi nodded and passed the order on behalf of Jiang Pengji. The vanguard battalion was the most elite part of the entire team, but Jinmen district had just been captured, so it was impossible to leave anyone to defend it. Therefore, before they set off, Jiang Pengji had informed Xiguanrang and asked him to deploy more than 1,000 troops from the main army to temporarily take over Jinmen district. According to her calculations, they would be able to make it in time after they nibbled away at the Red Lotus Group's ambush and turned to Jinmen County. The Red Lotus Group's news was lagging behind, and it would take a long time for it to be transmitted. When the time came, they wanted to send troops back to Jinmen district. Not only had Xueqi's siege equipment arrived, but Jiang Pengji had also arrived at their destination with the vanguard battalion. If the Red Lotus Group wanted to attack Jinmen County, which was at its peak, they would definitely need to pile up their heads. After resting for about 4 hours, the soldiers sent by Xiguanrang arrived. Jiang Pengji took 2 bites of her rations and drank some warm water. She mounted Little White's horse and waved her arms. "Depart." Behind him, Jinmen County crawled on the ground like a giant sleeping beast, gradually disappearing into the horizon. According to the battle plan, Jiang Pengji would lead her people to hide on the mountain road leading to Jinmen County. On the other side, the troops that had been transferred from Jinmen County finally arrived at Fenghu County after some twists and turns. The strategist of the Red Lotus Group, the scholar, was almost moved to tears. Xiguanrang provoked and threatened him again and again. The scholar always thought that he would receive news of Jiang Pengji attacking the city in the next second. He wanted to capture the scouts on Jiang Pengji's side and kill one as a warning to the others to boost their morale. However, the scouts were cunning and slippery like loaches. He could only find traces of them, but he couldn't catch them. This made the scholar angry. But now, all the troops from Jinmen County had arrived. How could the combined forces of the 2 counties not be able to hold back Lu Shi? The scholar felt a sense of security, and all of his uneasiness was dispelled. Lu Shi has gone too far. We must teach him a lesson and let him know how powerful our sacred group is. The scholar secretly clenched his teeth. The plan to outflank Lu Shi that he had previously come up with once again occupied his mind. He was very tempted. He had been frightened by the scouts for so long. Now that he had the upper hand, how could he not think of a way to get back at Lu Shi and make him lose face? Thinking of this, the scholar began to deploy troops. He dispatched more than 3,000 people to prepare a sneak attack on the small town and ambush Jiang Pengji. In the Red Lotus Group, the scholar had great authority. Almost no one except the leader could order him to withdraw the plan. However, the leader of the Red Lotus Group, who had led the troops from Jinmen County to support them, was dissatisfied. The leader said, "Counselor, our army has traveled all the way from Jinmen County to Fenghu County. The people are extremely tired. Why don't we give them some time to rest and reorganize?" At the mention of this, the scholar was instantly infuriated. He said righteously and sternly, "Speed is the most important thing in war, and opportunities are fleeting. If we delay opportunities for you and give Lu Shi a chance to catch his breath, Should I bear the responsibility, or should you? What's more, from Jinmen County to Fenghu County, you took the official road. The road is flat. How much physical strength can you waste? I haven't even held you accountable for the crime of slow support, which almost gave Lu Shi an opportunity to take advantage of. If he hadn't been so good at hiding the truth, Lu Shi might have already known that Fenghu County's troops were insufficient. What if they attacked the city before Jinmen County's reinforcements arrived? It was already good enough that the scholar didn't hold the leader accountable, but he still wanted to rest and reorganize and delay opportunities. After hearing this, the leader's face turned from white to green, and the anger in his heart burned. If it weren't for his fear of the scholar's position in the Red Lotus group, he would have slapped him. Who gave him the courage to embarrass himself? The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi, and restore the prestige of our sacred group." The scholar said arbitrarily, "Gather the troops, suppress Lu Shi, and restore the prestige of our sacred group." They dreamed of annihilating Jiang Pengji and achieving great achievements. Little did they know that there were already several traps waiting for them ahead. After capturing Jinmen County, Jiang Pengji ordered the messenger to pass the news to Qiguanrang, who was in charge of the Central Army. "I know about this. Inform the Lord and act according to the plan." When Qiguanrang heard that Jinmen County had been captured and that the vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pengji had set off after a short rest, he felt reassured. At this time, the scouts at the front also sent back information one after another. The troops of Jinmen County had arrived at Fenghu County. Qiguanrang raised his eyebrows and ordered the scouts to probe again. If there are signs of troops being deployed out of the city in Fenghu County, immediately report back and inform all the scouts to return. Not long after, Qiguanrang received news from the scouts that there was movement in Fenghu County. He raised his eyebrows and sneered coldly. The strategists guarding Fenghu County were really brainless. However, it was also thanks to the other party's lack of brains. If they had brains, they would only need to delay for one more day before they would receive the news that Jinmen County had been lost. By then, they would know that all of this was a scheme, and they would be more cautious in their actions. They might even be able to reduce their losses. It was a pity that they only knew how to talk on paper and thought that the war would develop according to their expectations. Little did they know that daydreaming was beautiful, but Jiang Pengji's efficiency in war was too high. Before nightfall, Qiguanrang retreated from the small town with his men and entered the mountain road leading to Fenghu County. He used himself as bait and pretended to attack. The scouts of the Red Lotus group, who were keeping a close eye on the movements in the small town, hurriedly passed the news back. When the scholar received the news, he was ecstatic. "The heavens are helping me. This time, I must make Thief Lu suffer a loss. Whoever can capture Thief Lu alive will be rewarded with 1,000 taels and countless beauties." According to the scholar's script, the Red Lotus group would send heavy troops to block several exits on the mountain road, and send 3,000 members out of the town to sneak in through the mountain road entrance to block Jiang Pengji's retreat. They would attack from the front and the back, besiege Jiang Pengji on the mountain road, and finally capture her alive. Chapter 639. The scholar's script was indeed perfect, but unfortunately, he had taken the wrong one. A cannon fodder with a low IQ wanted to enjoy the treatment of a protagonist? When the sky gradually darkened, all was silent except for the whistling of the mountain wind. Qiguanrang, who had already led his men into the mountain road, looked at the topographic map and pointed to a mountain wall. "It's here." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers behind him piled up the boulders that had already been found there, blocking the road to Fenghu County. He did this because he was worried that the Red Lotus group would split their troops into two groups, one from the exit and the other from the entrance. Now, Qiguanrang had blocked the road to the exit and was relying on this to block the ambush on the road leading to the exit. He wanted to see who was the turtle that was caught in the urn. With the efforts of the soldiers, a stone wall had been piled up inside the mountain road in less than an hour. Qiguanrang ordered the soldiers to rest in batches and recuperate. Once there was a situation, they would immediately beat the military drum to alert. In the middle of the night, the moon in the sky emitted a cold light, and the air was bitterly cold. The temperature at night was lower than during the day, and the members of the Red Lotus group were poor people. The proportion of people with night blindness was very high. At night they were like blind people. Cold and blind, how could they fight this battle? They were unwilling to launch a sneak attack at night. However, the scholar was radical and would use force. If they did not obey, they would be punished by military law. Everyone had no choice but to obey. The 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus group arrived in the small town and were preparing to launch a sneak attack, but they found that it was empty. The leader of the troops was uneasy, fearing that this was a trap. However, this could also be Lu Shi's evil plan. Perhaps Lu Shi wanted to sneak attack Fenghu County at night, but he didn't expect that they would stumble upon his plot by accident. When the two speculations were put together, the Red Lotus group would naturally choose the one that was beneficial to them. So, the leader of the troops was so shocked that he slapped his thigh and suddenly realized, it must be Lu Shi who wants to attack the city at night. The lackey beside him said flatteringly, it must be so. It's just that Lu Shi is ignorant and stupid. He doesn't know that our sacred group is blessed by the gods and that all crises can be easily solved. Lu Shi is just a mortal. How can he be compared with the heavenly soldiers and generals of the sacred group? With the lackey's words, the leader was in a good position. His face darkened as he said, chase after him. Capture that traitor Lu alive. Little did they know, a pair of black and bright eyes were hiding under the cover of the night, quietly watching them. The scouts found out that Jiang Pengji was lying in ambush on the other side of the mountain path. My lord, they have already entered the mountain path. Jiang Pengji held a blade of withered grass in her mouth and fed Little White with a basin in her other hand. The surrounding soldiers were taking turns to rest and recuperate. Only when they had enough strength and energy would they be able to fight. The mountain path was very windy, and the temperature was very low. Their warm clothes were somewhat useless, so they could only huddle together to keep warm. Although it was somewhat miserable, compared to the Red Lotus group, it was still extremely good treatment. Hearing the news from the scouts, she nodded and ordered her men to gather all the soldiers. Dian Yen was swift and decisive. He carried out Jiang Pengji's orders without any hesitation. The situation on Jiang Pengji's side was far better than that of the Red Lotus group. The mountain path was rugged and long. When the majority of the troops had entered the mountain path, the leader of the Red Lotus group ordered torches to be lit. According to the script, they had already blocked the exit and entrance of the mountain path. Now that they had lit the torches, they were not afraid of being discovered by Jiang Pengji. So what if they found out? There was no way out in front and no way out behind. Thief Lu could not escape even if he grew wings. With the light and warmth of the torches, the Red Lotus group advanced more smoothly. Their speed had also increased by a large margin. Qiguanrang had long been prepared. He placed a man at a certain distance. Qiguanrang didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he learned that the Red Lotus group was using torches to illuminate the area. The other side was truly fearless. Did they really think that they could eat them up? Aren't you afraid of choking to death? The mountain road was narrow and could only allow 2 carriages to travel side by side. If the Red Lotus group had caught them off guard, they might have suffered losses. Now that they had brazenly lit their torches, it was obvious that they were telling the enemies who had been ambushed, "Little ones, I'm coming." He wasn't sick, but there was a hole in his brain. A sneak attack should have the quality of a sneak attack. Qiguanrang ordered, "Order all battalions to prepare to defend against the enemy." The mountain road was narrow, and the advantage in numbers was not of much use. Qiguanrang was in charge of the main army. As the lieutenant of the right army, Li Yun's main responsibility was to protect the main army and coordinate with the vanguard battalion. Jiang Pengji and Dian Yen were in the vanguard battalion, so Li Yun was left behind to assist the main army. Upon receiving Qiguanrang's order, he had a few rows of soldiers hold shields and form the first line of defense to prevent the Red Lotus group from using long-range arrows to injure people. Then, the crossbowmen would shoot from behind to block the fiercest wave of sneak attacks. If the enemy used the tactic of corpses to break through this line of defense, or if they ran out of arrows, there would be soldiers armed with long spears to fill in the gaps. This would buy time and ensure that the main army's line of defense would not be broken. The mountain road was special. Many large pieces of equipment could not be brought along. They could only rely on the cooperation between different types of soldiers to form lines of defense. Fortunately, every soldier was well trained, and the cooperation between them was a permanent part of their daily training. Their side was solemnly waiting, but the Red Lotus group was still daydreaming. Little did they know that there was a fierce wolf in front of them, waiting to strike, and a fierce tiger behind them, eyeing them covetously. The vanguard battalion led by Jiang Pengji slowly approached the target. To prevent exposure, the distance between each other was a little long. As soon as the first wave of confrontation between the Red Lotus Group and the main army broke out, the vanguard battalion would immediately launch a sneak attack from the rear. Dian Yen gritted his molars nervously. Thick blue veins popped out on his forehead. It was the dead of winter, and his face was covered in hot sweat. Zhang Pengji said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous. This is just a small battle. With me here, nothing will go wrong." Dian Yen tried to slow down his breathing and slowly adjust his state of mind. When the cold wind blew, his hot sweat turned into cold sweat. It was so cold that he shivered. On the mountain road, the members of the Red Lotus Group could only hear the howling mountain wind and the footsteps of people walking. Occasionally, gravel rolled down, making a rustling sound. No matter how long the road was, there would always be an end. Not to mention that the mountain road leading to Fenghu County was not long. The messenger reported, "There's a situation ahead. Thief Lu and his group seem to have discovered the traces of our group." The leader was not surprised. He laughed and scolded, "We're holding torches. If they didn't discover us, they'd be blind. So what if they've put on a battle formation? It's just a last-ditch struggle. Brothers, go. Capture Thief Lu alive. 1,000 taels of silver, countless beauties, whatever you want." As long as they attracted Lu Shi's main firepower, the brothers in Fenghu County would sneak in from the exit of the mountain road and launch a sneak attack on Lu Shi's weaker rear. Then they would surround Thief Lu so that he would not be able to take care of both the front and the back. Wouldn't that be wonderful? However, there was a saying that went, "Dreams are plentiful, but reality is harsh." How could a sinister guy like Qiguan Rang not have a backup plan? Did you see the stone wall he had people pile up? Were you surprised? Were you surprised? Chapter 640. As a non-mainstream streamer, Zhang Pengji's daily live stream was as punctual as if she was clocking in at work. If she suddenly started streaming in the middle of the night one day, there was no doubt that she would stir up some trouble. There was no shortage of night owls with a rich nightlife in the world. Zhang Pengji had just started streaming, and the audience seats were full in less than a second. Zisa Junyan, the streaming room is actually starting in the middle of the night. How rare. Simia Mayawo, as a loyal fan of the streaming room, every time I start streaming in the middle of the night, something always happens. This time should be no exception. But where is this place? Why is it so dark? If I hadn't turned on the infrared panoramic view, I wouldn't have been able to see anything. Xiaoye Jiawa, looking at the image, it should be the mountain road during the day. Tonight's program is a night attack to outflank the Red Lotus Group? MOU's Fengmei, dumplings? Dumpling fillings with the flavor of the Red Lotus Group? Zhang Pengji didn't explain much. She just briefly introduced the situation. She started an extra live stream tonight, not for the audience, but to make use of the camera in the streaming room. As mentioned before, the camera in the streaming room could be rotated without any blind spots. It was positioned directly above Zhang Pengji's head, and the angle of view moved as she moved. In addition, the height and angle of the camera could be adjusted. The captured image could be seen not only by the audience in the streaming room, but also by Zhang Pengji. Using this angle of view, Zhang Pengji could easily control the overall situation and grasp the movements of the Red Lotus Group. As for the live stream, that was just incidental. With the camera 100 meters above the ground and the continuous information sent back by the scouts, Zhang Pengji had a rough idea. "My lord, when do we attack?" Dian Yen asked in a low voice, looking eager to try. The axes in his hands were already hungry and thirsty. This time, Zhang Pengji didn't ask him for weapons. Dian Yen could finally kill to his heart's content. Zhang Pengji said, "Wait." Dian Yen was surprised. Wait for what? The Red Lotus Group had only dispatched 3,000 troops, but the strength of the Central Army was not as strong as the vanguard. If they delayed for too long, they might be overturned. When they fight with Wen Zhang and attract the firepower of the main force, we will attack from the rear. They will be in a mess. If we attack now, they will react and fight while retreating. If Wen Zhang's side pursues them, it will be difficult for them to maintain their formation, and it will be easy for trouble. If that was the case, the Red Lotus Group would be determined to break out of the encirclement. If their attacks were too fierce, they might really be able to escape. The prey that Zhang Pengji set her eyes on always had only one ending. If she let her prey escape, where would she put her dignity as a hunter? Dian Yan nodded. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin had already arranged everything properly and came to report. Jiang Pengji asked her, "Has the wounded been dealt with properly?" Jiang Nongqin replied, "Two of them affected their wounds, causing their wounds to split open. However, the situation is not serious. There are military doctors taking care of them." Most of the military doctors were female soldiers with better medical skills in the female battalion. Due to the influence of the environment, Jiang Pengji did not expand the scale of the women's battalion at will. From the beginning to the end, it was still a battalion. Jiang Pengji had her own reasons for the slow increase in the number of female troops and the lack of large-scale expansion. Firstly, there were too few women applying for the recruitment. This was the most fundamental reason. Secondly, Jiang Pengji was also intentionally controlling the number of people. The female battalion was more focused on quality than quantity. After all, the reproduction of the population required women to give birth. It was impossible to let all women go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Moreover, not all women were eager to stand out. Women with such a strong desire were often deeply hurt. In fact, most women preferred a stable life and liked to stay at home to support their husbands and raise their children. Everyone had their own aspirations. Jiang Pengji did not force them. Thirdly, although Jiang Pengji was unwilling to think about it, women were indeed not as convenient as men in terms of physiology. For example, menstruation. Marching to war was not child's play. The enemy would not be lenient to you just because you were a woman or because your body was inconvenient. In fact, the enemy would only be crueler. They would take advantage of your weakness to kill you. If one did not pick the soft persimmon to pinch, would they look for those who were difficult to chew? Based on various realities, while Jiang Pengji focused on the development of the female battalion's strength, she also carefully considered other factors. If the female battalion had physiological inconveniences, they could temporarily be transferred to the logistics to deal with the miscellaneous items in the military camp. Those with good medical skills could enter the medical area and take on jobs similar to nurses or doctors to take care of the wounded. It could solve the problems of the female soldiers and reduce the pressure in other areas. Jiang Nongqin managed the female battalion very well and had a good reputation. Regardless of how the outside world viewed the female battalion, at least the soldiers under Jiang Pengji were friendly to the female battalion. Jiang Nongqin's efforts were indispensable for the current development. Order the female battalion to coordinate with the attack and cover the vanguard battalion to clear the way. Jiang Nongqin said in a powerful and resonant voice. Yes, sir. On the narrow mountain path, the face of the leader of the Red Lotus group was so dark that ink seemed to drip from it. According to his script, Qiguan rank side should have hastily responded to the battle. Then they would be slaughtered to the point of abandoning their helmets and armor. As soon as they saw each other, they would scatter in all directions. They would never be so calm and composed. The script was wrong. How did Thief Lu do it? Whether it was defending or attacking, he was calm and composed. After the battle started, one by one, their side fell. On the other hand, the other side was at two extremes. They were well prepared. The shields that blocked the arrows were densely packed and could not be broken through for a while. If they wanted to advance, the arrows in front of them were like a tide. Whoever dared to rush forward would be pierced into a hedgehog. For a moment, the two sides were in a stalemate. The Red Lotus group had lost hundreds of corpses before they could barely advance 4 or 5 feet. Bah! I'd like to see how many arrows they have. Send out the signal. We'll attack from both sides and capture Thief Lu alive. A soldier of the Red Lotus group obeyed the order. He picked up a heavy bow, ignited a fire arrow, and shot a few arrows into the sky. For the convenience of transmitting orders, they agreed to use the fire arrow as the signal. However, the mountain path was steep, and the arrows could not fly too high. The Red Lotus group had also specially arranged for scouts to observe the fire arrow. Qiguan Rang also saw it, and a malicious smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Stupid. By doing so, he not only informed his companions but also Jiang Pengji. Sure enough, it didn't take long for another wave of commotion and battle cries to be heard from behind. The leader of the Red Lotus group was horrified. He turned his head to look behind him. What was going on? Why did Thief Lu's troops appear behind them? Could it be that their flawless plan had been leaked, and Thief Lu had been vigilant and had set up a trap for him to jump into? For a moment, All kinds of speculations occupied his mind. In a daze, there were only floating blurry shadows and swaying human heads in front of him. No. He had already sent out the signal to gather and attack. Why did Thief Lu's troops in front not cause trouble? What had gone wrong? They had agreed to cooperate with Thief Lu. Where did the reinforcements from Fenghu County go? Where did they go? They were blocked by the stone wall that Qiguanrang had built. It would be very difficult to cross this thick and heavy stone wall. What was even more sinister was that Qiguanrang had ordered the archers to lie in ambush on the other side of the stone wall. If one came, shoot one. If a pair came, shoot a pair. Chapter 641. The Red Lotus group was completely dumbfounded this time. The people guarding the exit anxiously waited for the fire arrows to appear so that they could attack Thief Lu's army from both sides. However, when they finally rushed over, they discovered that the path in front of them was blocked by piled-up stone walls. Arrows continued to shoot down from above the stone walls. Some members of the Red Lotus group were caught off guard and were pierced by the arrows. Fresh blood filled the air and dyed the yellow-brown ground. Faint shouts of "kill" came from behind the stone wall. The Red Lotus group, who had come to provide support, realized that they had been tricked. Qiguanrang was calm and collected. He helped Li Yun defend the front line while commanding the archers on the stone wall to resist the strong enemy. Because the mountain path was narrow, Little White's body could not move easily. Therefore, Jiang Pengji gave up fighting on horseback. She held her spear and planned to fight on foot. The archers of the vanguard battalion killed a wave of enemies first. When the distance between the two sides narrowed, they drew their swords and engaged in close combat. They had to defeat this wave of enemies before the Red Lotus group broke through the defense of the stone wall. Otherwise, Qiguanrang's central army would be in danger. During the melee, the crowd was too chaotic. Jiang Pengji quickly disappeared, but those with good eyesight saw her. It was clearly a melee, but she could always find a gap. She either stabbed the enemy's fatal spot with her spear, or crushed the enemy's throat from behind, or stepped on the enemy's shoulder or head and rushed into the enemy's group. Wherever the silver light passed, blood splattered. She had a strong sense of combat. Whether it was an open spear or a hidden arrow, they could not get close to her. Jiang Pengji took a moment to glance. Her long leg kicked a person's heart, and she used the force to jump high. She stepped onto the cliff of the mountain path and leaped sideways. At the same time, her spear was not idle. It stabbed, entangled, blocked, pounced, and pointed. Cold stars twinkled, silver light flashed, and the snow-white shadow of the spear was accompanied by blood. The Red Lotus group had also discovered such a killer. However, Jiang Pengji's style of using offense as defense was truly frightening. It was not that they did not want to kill Jiang Pengji, but they were afraid of being killed. It seemed that no matter how many people pounced on her, they would eventually lie down, leaving a bloody hole in their bodies. Jiang Pengji charged straight in one direction. Dian Yen, who was behind her, did not know whether to laugh or cry, but he could not allow Jiang Pengji to act recklessly. While paying attention to Jiang Pengji's situation, he led the troops to charge forward and kill the enemy. Jiang Nongqin led the women's battalion and coordinated from the side. At the same time, she blocked the Red Lotus group's retreat. The two sides fought fiercely. Shouts, screams, howls of pain, and the muffled sounds of sharp weapons piercing through flesh. All that was left were broken limbs and wreckage. Almost everyone who was standing had become a soul collector. Their faces, clothes, sleeves, weapons, shoes. There was not a single spot that was not stained with blood. The pungent and sticky smell permeated the silent mountain path. On the other side, the Red Lotus group on the other side of the stone wall also gradually had the intention to retreat. The archers were truly too powerful. Not only were they accurate, but their arrows also had a long range. They tried to attack several times, but each time, they couldn't stand firm. Instead, they left behind hundreds of corpses. Under such circumstances, what else could they not understand? They had all fallen into the enemy's trap. "General, what should we do now? What should we do? What can I do?" The height of the stone wall was not high, but for them, it was like a natural moat. If they did not care about the losses and force their way through, they could break through, but the losses were too great, and the leader already had the intention to retreat. He took a few deep breaths and looked in the direction of the stone wall with a sinister gaze. He thought for a long time.
Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Retreat."
Retreat? The people around him were stunned. If they retreated, what would happen to their brothers on the other side of the stone wall? If we don't retreat, are we going to continue to court death? Are you blind? This is a trap targeted at us. If we force our way through, we will be courting death. More importantly, the losses had already been incurred. If they continued to attack, the losses would be even greater. What if they were held accountable? To everyone's surprise, the Red Lotus group, who had been summoned by the rocket, attacked several times without any results. They actually left behind hundreds of corpses and retreated. When Xueqi heard the news, he was astonished. At the same time, he relaxed his anxious heart. If they continued to attack, the Central Army would be fighting on both sides, and the pressure on the defense would be great. He was confident that he could persevere, but the number of casualties was hard to say. Now that they had retreated, it meant that they had completely given up on the 3,000 Red Lotus group members who had come to ambush them. He could make dumplings with peace of mind. Before he could send someone to shout the news and strike a blow to the enemy's confidence, a series of shouts came from the front. The enemy has been beheaded. Jiang Pengji rushed all the way from the point where the two armies met to the center of the Red Lotus group, leaving behind countless corpses. Her red clothes and silver armor were dyed the color of blood. It was as if she had been soaked in a pool of blood for a night. Her face was covered in sticky blood. Jiang Pengji rushed toward the enemy's leader. At first, she didn't know who the leader was, but he was too stupid. He kept shouting for others to protect him, so Jiang Pengji knew that he was the leader. She used the spear to shake off the guy who was blocking her way. With a flick of her wrist, the spear left her hand and pierced through his throat. Until the last moment, his widened eyes were still filled with panic and disbelief. Dian Yen led his men to attack from the rear. With the coordination of the women's battalion, the long axe danced, cutting melons and vegetables along the way. If Jiang Pengji's killing was considered artistic, then Dian Yan's was only brutal. To quote the words of the live stream viewers, "If I swing my axe, your body may be separated from your family." As for Jiang Nongqin, she still used her usual ruthless methods. Compared to fighting on horseback, she was more suitable for fighting on foot. Jiang Pengji's voice spread throughout the mountain road. The people of the Red Lotus group had long been killed to the point that their morale was wavering. The morale of the army was shaken, and there was little will to fight. Coupled with Jiang Pengji's voice, they threw away their helmets and abandoned their armor. They no longer had the will to fight. Once someone chose to surrender to save their life, this depressed atmosphere spread like a virus. With one, there would naturally be a second and a third. These soldiers of the Red Lotus group had no sense of honor, let alone fight to the death. Now that the situation was hopeless, they naturally wouldn't struggle to the death. There was a way out if they surrendered. If they stubbornly resisted, what awaited them would be death. Xueqi looked at the battle situation that had been decided and let out a long sigh of relief. Capturing captives and cleaning up the battlefield, Jiang Pengji had delegated these tasks to others. Xueqi instructed everyone, tidied up his appearance, and then went to see Jiang Pengji. "My lord." Jiang Pengji glanced at Xueqi and said with a smile, "Did the scene just now scare Wenjing?" To put it bluntly, Xueqi main army was the bait to delay Fenghu County. If they weren't careful, they might lose their lives.
Xueqi said, "What's there to be afraid of in such a small scene?"
Even if his life was at stake, Xueqi didn't show any anxious emotions. His mental fortitude was excellent. Clean up the battlefield. There's no time for the soldiers to rest and reorganize. We must rush back to Jinmen County as soon as possible. Chapter 642. The sneak attack had failed and they had been surrounded instead. When the news of the Red Lotus group's defeat reached Fenghu County, the scholar was stunned. A moment ago, he had been happily waiting for his subordinates to escort Lu Shi over. In the next second he had lost his soul. "What did you say?" The scholar strode forward and grabbed the messenger's collar. His face was ferocious and his eyes were wide open. Anger burned in his chest. He felt that he must have heard wrong or that the messenger had given the wrong information. How could they have been defeated? The messenger had difficulty breathing as he was lifted by the collar. He was also frightened by the scholar. Who would have thought that the usually gentle and thin military counselor could be so terrifying when he was angry? However, he still had to say what needed to be said. He stammered and repeated the news. Not only did the 3,000 troops sent by the Red Lotus Group fail to capture Xueqi, but they were also surrounded on the mountain road and annihilated. The scholar was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He was so angry and resentful that he threw the messenger to the ground.
Something was wrong. The scholar was about to gather his troops to get back at them when he suddenly remembered something.
Wait. Although Xueqi's troops are strong and can indeed defeat our 3,000 valiant generals, what about the people outside? If the troops outside had rushed into the mountain road to fight, they would not have been defeated like this. The messenger's face turned pale. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He knelt on the ground and crawled, not daring to get up. Seeing this, the scholar knew that there was an inside story. The audacious messenger had concealed the information.
He scolded him sternly. "Tell me quickly what happened. If there is even half a word of falsehood, the gods will punish you and your entire clan will be annihilated."
The messenger was so scared that he could not stop trembling. He spat out everything. "Military counselor, Xueqi is really treacherous. It's not that we didn't go to rescue him."
The messenger was so scared that he confessed the information that he had concealed without hesitation.
However, the content of the information had been edited. Although the scholar did not have much knowledge, he was very cruel and jealous. If he knew the truth, many people would have to bear the consequences. They had no choice but to think of ways to push the blame onto Jiang Pengji to lessen their own responsibilities. If the scholar was angry, he would vent his anger on Jiang Pengji. Small fries like them would be spared. After the general discovered the abnormality, he led his troops into the mountain path to provide assistance. How could he have known that traitor Lu was so cunning? He had already blocked that part of the mountain path and sent hundreds of archers to stand by on the stone wall. The general tried to attack several times. Hundreds of his brothers died, but they still couldn't shake the Lu clan's defense line. At this moment, the brothers inside could no longer hold on. For the sake of the other brothers, the general had no choice but to fall back. Otherwise, he wouldn't have abandoned his brothers so easily. "Counselor, please understand, you must avenge your brothers." Hearing this explanation, the scholar was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Of course, that wasn't the only thing that had infuriated him. The blow that had caused the scholar to ascend to the heavens hadn't ended just yet. The scholar used all his strength to suppress his anger. His mind was blank, and he couldn't think of any countermeasure to get back at him. Obviously, Thief Lu's deployment should have seen through their tricks, and the other party was already on guard. If they used a sneak attack again, it was destined to be ineffective. As he thought about it, a small leader staggered in from outside and shouted, "Counselor, bad news." "What bad news?" "I'm fine." The scholar frowned. His already chaotic heart was even more irritated by this person's interruption, like a ball of yarn that couldn't be sorted out. He said, "Tell me what happened. If it's not important, I'll definitely punish you." The small leader had run all the way here and was already panting from exhaustion and sweating profusely. Hearing the scholar's words, he suddenly had the urge to cry but had no tears. He said uncomfortably, "Counselor, Jinmen district has been lost." Ha! Everyone present was dumbfounded. The scholar almost thought that he was hallucinating. "What did you say was lost?" The small leader caught his breath and said in tears, "Jinmen district has been captured by Thief Lu." The scholar's eyelids twitched uncontrollably, and he gradually panicked. However, he still said resolutely, "That's impossible. Thief Lu was almost right under our noses. How could he have the manpower to attack Jinmen district? Lying about military intelligence, do you know your crime?" The small leader was burning with anxiety. He said, "It's true. Yesterday morning, Thief Lu suddenly led troops to attack Jinmen district. Not long after, he lost. Countless brothers were killed and captured. If this lowly one says anything false, let the gods strike this lowly one to death." Jinmen district was really lost? The scholar's heart sank to the bottom of a lake. His hands and feet were cold, and he was so shocked that he forgot how to breathe. "Impossible, this is impossible." Thief Lu's target was clearly Fenghu district. He had been sending scouts to probe. How could he have extra manpower to go to Jinmen district? When did he go? If Jinmen District was captured by Thief Lu, how could he have had enough troops to surround and ambush them in the middle of the night? The scholar couldn't figure out the key point. There was no time at all. Either Thief Lu had descended from the heavens and created something out of nothing, like an immortal technique like casting beans to form soldiers. That was how he won. Or Lu Shi had brought more than 10,000 troops with him. There must have been other troops that had been secretly hidden. The scholar was shocked out of his wits by the news one after another. For a moment, he didn't suspect Xueqi. Regardless of whether the scholar suspected or not, Xueqi, the ruthless and evil guy, had stirred up a wave of trouble. Military counselor, what should we do now? The group of subordinates looked at each other. The scholar shuddered violently. With a cold expression, he said, "Gather the troops and return to Jinmen District. Thief Lu's main force is still here. If we take the official road, we can definitely reach Jinmen District before Thief Lu. There are still our people and believers in Jinmen District. We can take it down if we work together." It was rare for the scholar to be smart for once. If everything went according to his plan, and they were fast enough, they might be able to take back Jinmen District. After all, the Red Lotus Group had been operating in Jinmen District for a long time. Many people hated them to the bone, but there were also many people who were deeply bewitched. They believed in the gods in their hearts and worshipped them every day. Zhang Pengji had just taken over Jinmen District. There were not many troops left behind, and her power was unstable. As long as the Red Lotus Group reached Jinmen District before her, it would be hard to tell who would win or lose. However, the scholar's opponent was Zhang Pengji, who was definitely a person of action. She was known as the master of rhythm on the battlefield. Did he want to compete with her in speed? Hehe. On the other side, Zhang Pengji rushed back with her troops. Xueqi was her personal accountant, private warehouse manager, and invisible chief strategist. His tacit understanding with Zhang Pengji was not just for show. The siege equipment arrived at Jinmen District almost at the same time as her. Chapter 643. Although the mountain road was difficult to travel, the overall length was much shorter than the official road. In addition, Zhang Pengji was very strict with the training of the soldiers, so this level of rapid travel was nothing at all. As soon as they arrived, the siege equipment prepared by Xueqi arrived one after another. Qiguanrang smiled and said, "It seems that Xiao Yu trusts my lord very much." Yang Xi's expression was complicated. He said, if he didn't trust her, this batch of siege equipment wouldn't have been delivered so quickly. The equipment was large and difficult to transport. The speed was certainly not as fast as Zhang Pengji's simple and rapid march. To grasp the time accurately, it was necessary to take into account the variables on the road and the speed of the transportation of manpower. At the same time, it was necessary to be extremely confident. What confidence? If Zhang Pengji did not conquer Jinmen District according to the plan, this batch of siege equipment would have been given to the Red Lotus Group. What was the result? Zhang Pengji conquered Jinmen District and even cooperated with Qiguanrang to ambush the Red Lotus Group's troops in a very short time. Finally, they returned to Jinmen District before the Red Lotus Group could react. It seemed to have only taken 2 days, but the energy consumed was unimaginable to ordinary people. If Xueqi did not have 100% trust in Zhang Pengji, how could this batch of equipment be delivered in such a timely manner? Zhang Pengji comforted Little White, who was panting a little impatiently, and ordered people to send it the best food. Let's go into the city and discuss the next step of the plan. According to the plan, the next step should be to attack Xueqi District, but this time it was not as easy as attacking Jinmen District. After 2 consecutive days of marching and fighting, they only took turns to rest for half a night. Now the people and horses were tired, and their combat power was not as strong as at the beginning. Zhang Pengji felt that it was necessary to have a deep discussion with the strategists about how to attack Xueqi District and how to fight this battle. However, with such an unreasonable lord, the strategists expressed that it was very difficult. They only asked one question. If they made a plan, would the lord obediently follow it? However, the battlefield was changing rapidly. No matter how good a plan was, it could not keep up with the changes. They would not force Zhang Pengji to follow it. As for Xueqi District, Yang Xi and the others naturally had their own plans. Qiguanrang advocated using Jinmen District as a stronghold to contain the elites and main forces of the Red Lotus Group,
and sending other people to attack Choyu district. Yangxi frowned and said, "That won't do. The situation in Jinmen County isn't stable, and many people have been bewitched by the cult. If these people work together with the Red Lotus group outside, it will definitely cause us great trouble. If the city falls, our lives will be in danger."
Jiang Pengji agreed with Yang Si.
To her, if her territory was taken away, she could still fight back. If her counselor died because of this, who would compensate her? Qiguan Rang said, "Could it be that my lord doesn't trust Rang?"
Jiang Pengji felt wronged. How could she not trust Qiguan Rang?
"Since my lord trusts Rang, let me give this matter a try." Jinmen County was a good start. If they could take down Chuyu County in one go, the morale of the Red Lotus group would be greatly damaged, and it was very likely that they would not be able to recover from this setback. This is a great opportunity for my lord to reclaim Chengde County. Qiguan Rang was usually cautious and kept a low profile, but his battle style was the complete opposite. He was treacherous and bold, seeking victory in the midst of danger. If Jiang Pengji had a strong gambler's mentality, Qiguan Rang was no different. It was not without reason that the two of them could regard each other as confidants and have similar interests. He had taken the initiative to make this suggestion. He wanted to order 3,000 to 5,000 troops to defend Jinmen County and delay the main force of the Red Lotus group. It was extremely bold. However, behind his boldness was his confidence in his own strength. Jiang Pengji could not say that Qiguan Rang was wrong, so she could only sigh and nod in agreement.
"In that case, you can give it a try. If you can't defend it, you should prioritize your life and retreat in time. Don't force yourself.
There are still a pile of official documents waiting for you to go back and deal with in Fengyi County. Without Wen Zhang to share the burden, won't the others be exhausted to death?"
Jiang Pengji did not decline pretentiously.
Saying a few words was a sign of concern. If she declined too much, it would be questioning his strength. She had always respected the strong. In her opinion, the strong did not have supreme martial strength. A strong mind, strong martial strength, and strong wisdom could all be called strong. Qiguan Rang's martial strength stopped at the level of a square dance with a sword, but who could say that he was weak? A strong brain was also a strong person. At first, Qiguan Rang was very touched. His heart was so warm that he wanted to cry. When he heard Jiang Pengji's words, he wondered if it was illegal to kill his master. His heart felt so cold. Yang Si secretly rolled his eyes. He knew that Jiang Pengji was not a kind person. She was a black-hearted boss who brainlessly exploited her employees. Before Qiguan Rang could not control himself and was about to kill his master, Jiang Pengji said with a serious face, "The important task of guarding Jinmen County will be handed over to Wen Zhang. Given that the Red Lotus group has a large number of people, I will only take 4,000 troops with me this time. The rest will stay in Jinmen County." When he heard this number, Qiguan Rang showed a look of disapproval. How could a mere 4,000 people take down Choyu County, which had an abundance of troops? Jiang Pengji said, 4,000 people is not a small number. We have brought enough siege equipment with us. We don't have to worry about not being able to take down a county. Not to mention that we have spies within the Red Lotus group. They will definitely play a role at critical moments. It will not be difficult to take down Choyu County with us working together. She took 4,000 people with her, which meant that Qiguan Rang only had 6,000 people left, but he had to face 10,000 to 20,000 enemies. Qiguan Rang wanted to say more, but he was stopped by Jiang Pengji. At that moment, there was a messenger outside who wanted to deliver a message. Jiang Pengji promised, and a soldier ran in. He was half kneeling on the ground, holding a roll of bamboo slips with both hands. "My lord, this is a letter sent by a child beggar."
A letter sent by a child beggar?
Jiang Pengji did not mind that it was dirty. She picked up the roll of worn-out, gray bamboo slips and unfolded it. She was instantly amused. She asked, "Where is the child beggar now? Quickly bring him here." "What a good Xueqi, you did a good job." The messenger said, "The child beggar is waiting outside the residence." Yang Si and Qiguan Rang looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. At the same time, the three generals, Li Yun, Dian Yan, and Jiang Nongqin, were also urgently summoned to the hall. When the three of them arrived, they saw a thin child beggar in ragged clothes kneeling in the hall. His hair was unkempt and his face was dirty.
Only his eyes were black and bright. Jiang Nongqin sat down in her seat silently. Dian Yan also did not say a word. Only Li Yun was slightly curious. "My lord, who is this person?" "A great hero," Jiang Pengji said with a smile. She ordered the child beggar to tell her everything in detail. The child beggar did not have stage fright. He spoke in an orderly manner. It turned out that after Jiang Pengji conquered the small town, Xueqi found an excuse to leave Jinmen district and rush to Red Lotus district. Why did he go to Red Lotus district? Naturally, it was to cooperate with Jiang Pengji and create opportunities for her. The leader of the Red Lotus group boasted that he was a deity who had descended to the world to save the common people. In reality, he was wearing the skin of a deity to cheat the people of their money. He was extravagant and lascivious. He wanted nothing more than to monopolize everything. Since the loot was not distributed evenly, there would naturally be people who were unhappy. And Xueqi had given advice to the scholar several times, allowing the scholar to be in the limelight. The scholar deliberately suppressed Xueqi and did not let him appear in front of the leader of the Red Lotus group, but some people with ulterior motives noticed it. Chapter 644. Xueqi had always known that there was discord within the Red Lotus group. He had tried to understand it in depth, but at that time, he had no capital and could not win over anyone. He had been in the Red Lotus group for some time, but he could not climb to a higher position. Naturally, he could not investigate further. With Jiang Pengji's financial support, Xueqi was good at managing connections. He was like a tiger that had grown wings. Soon, he became a small leader that attracted much attention. The scholar asked him many times for advice and asked Xueqi to be the gunman. However, the scholar did not recommend Xueqi to the chief as he had promised. Instead, he suppressed him, intentionally or unintentionally. Xueqi did not care at first. He did not expect to attract a big fish. This big fish was the second in command of the Red Lotus group. He boasted of going through fire and water with the chief, but in the end, he could not compare to a villain who only knew how to flatter. He had always regarded the scholar as a thorn in his side. If that was the case, it would have been fine. However, the cult leader only cared about himself and did not even let his brother have a sip of the meat soup. This made the second in command extremely unhappy, and he bore a grudge against the scholar and the Red Lotus cult leader. The second in command wanted to pull the scholar down and replace the chief's position, but he never had the chance. Xueqi's appearance gave the second in command hope. He began to contact Xueqi in secret, repeatedly sowing discord between Xueqi and the scholar, and promised him a handsome reward. Xueqi was well aware of this, but he pretended to be deaf and dumb. He secretly tested the man's true intentions. After testing, he saw it, dozed off, and found a pillow. It was too wonderful for words. In the end, they hit it off and decided to stir things up. This beggar was the messenger that Xueqi had secretly sent to inform Jiang Pengji of an important piece of news in advance. Xueqi wanted to cooperate with the second in command. He would obey him on the surface and help him rebel against the chief of the Red Lotus group, luring them to move their troops out of Honglian district. When Honglian district's troops were empty, he would send reinforcements. Jiang Pengji could take advantage of this opportunity to enter Honglian district. When the scholar received news that the chief had been captured and imprisoned and hurriedly sent troops to stop the second in command, Jiang Pengji could turn around and attack Jinmen district. Finally, when the scholar and the second in command were almost done fighting in Xueqi district, she would take them down. Jiang Pengji listened to the beggar's narration and could not help but frown inwardly. She still wore an appropriate amount of joy on her face. She hadn't expected Xueqi to be such a drama queen. He was really good at playing as a three-faced spy. The live stream viewers listened for a long time, but they were still confused. It took them a long time to figure it out. Midsummer Mosquito Duo. The spectators are so shocked that their hands almost fell off. God and Xueqi's three-faced spy is really sneaky. Shivering Winter. Although this plan sounds great, I'm still a little worried. Who knew if this Xueqi was really willing to help the host? If he wasn't a three-pronged spy, but instead played around with three sides and was only loyal to himself, then it would be terrible. Spring Love Sleepy. I saw the previous live stream. Xueqi and the host are in a cooperative relationship. There's no loyalty between them. His and the live stream's interests were aligned. Xueqi would only benefit if the host benefited,
so the possibility of Xueqi scamming the host was very, very small. Chilly autumn, I don't care who Xueqi is loyal to. The Oscars owe him a Best Actor award for his ability as a three-faced spy. Not only did the Oscars owe Xueqi a camp, but even Jiang Pengji couldn't help but want to double-click 666 to show her commendation. Although the Red Lotus Group's level wasn't high, the thinking of a group of ruffians in the pugilistic world was quite strange. And Xueqi was able to accurately grasp their thoughts and next moves, seizing any opportunity that might benefit him. Such a person was indeed a talent. The beggar received his reward, and the strategist who had been listening at the side spoke. Xueqi Rang frowned. He had always been paranoid, and he didn't trust Xueqi at all. Yang Si had had a brief encounter with Xueqi, and he also knew some things about him from Wei Ci. He was more optimistic about this plan. Xueqi Rang asked, "Can Xueqi be trusted?" Yang Si's lips curled into a faint smile, with a hint of scheming. He glanced at the goose feather fan in Xueqi Rang's hand and felt a chill run down his spine. He silently averted his eyes. It doesn't matter whether he's trustworthy or not. What's important is how much benefit my lord can gain from this. Even if Yang Si has ulterior motives, he can't shake my lord's foundation. My lord can sit on top of the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Watch as the Red Lotus Group splits internally, fight and exhaust each other, and finally reap the benefits. However, Jiang Pengji would rather choose to start the war during the new year. She couldn't afford to waste time. Li Yun was confused by what he heard. After a while he said embarrassedly, "Then, sirs, are we going to watch them kill each other?" Xueqi Rang raised his head and glanced at Li Yun. He said strangely, "Why wouldn't we take advantage of the situation?" Li Yun was speechless. Dian Yen pondered for a long time, deliberating his words over and over again. Only then did he speak cautiously. But if we follow this plan, I'm afraid we won't have enough manpower." Dian Yan's expression was slightly dispirited. They had dispatched more than 10,000 troops, but if the 4 districts were to fight, not only would they have to run left and right, but they would also have to be on edge. This would greatly exhaust the troops' energy and combat power. If they followed the previous plan, they would fight steadily, going one district at a time. The 10,000 troops wouldn't be too strapped for cash. However, if they cooperated with Xueqi's plan, it would be equivalent to fighting on multiple fronts. Their troops would be too scattered, and it wouldn't be conducive to consolidation and development. Jiang Pengji said, "We can't miss this opportunity. If we miss this opportunity, there won't be another one." Dian Yan's worries aren't without reason, so I plan to mobilize a portion of the new troops here to defend the city. This will more or less deter the Red Lotus Group's rascals. The Red Lotus Group wasn't afraid of Jiang Pengji because they felt that the latter's troops were too few. They could try to crush them. This was like a gang fight. A group of hooligans surrounded a martial arts master and wanted to gang up on him. Even if they knew that the opponent was a martial arts master, he was only one person. The hooligans would definitely be able to defeat him if they attacked together. What if the martial arts master wasn't one person, but 7 or 8? The hooligans would definitely be cautious and wouldn't dare to act rashly. Similarly, once Jiang Pengji began to increase the number of troops and the number of people, the Red Lotus Group would have to think twice if they wanted to make a move against her. Xueqi Rang lowered his eyes when he heard this. His lord had an eccentric habit. If the new recruits hadn't trained for enough time and reached a certain standard, she wouldn't easily let the new recruits join the battle. The chances of new recruits with insufficient experience and ability dying in battle were too high. To her, letting immature new recruits join the battle was tantamount to sending them to their deaths. Once she let the new recruits join the battle, it meant that she had already made up her mind to accomplish something. Yang Si smiled maliciously. "If we mobilize the troops, I'm afraid Zixiao and the rest will go crazy from exhaustion." Jiang Pengji continued, "Zixiao's health isn't good. No one will tire him out. Isn't there still Feng Zhan to hold the fort?" Wei Ci just had to do what he was supposed to do and dump the extra labor on Feng Zhen. Yang Si was surprised for a moment. There was something indescribably strange in his heart. Chapter 645. The viewers in the live stream room were all veterans who were used to big storms. They laughed at the poor Feng Zhen while silently eating their dog food. Not to mention anything else, their streamer really spoiled the little princess strategist too much. Today's wait.
I'm crying for Feng Zhen. He's also a sickly person. You can't bully him just because he's unrestrained.
Yu Pang, holding the fresh dog food and silently nibbling on it in the corner, the streamer really spoils the little princess strategist.
Road to losing weight. It's probably because Feng Zhen is too unrestrained and Simei is too obedient. Obedient children are always more likable. Elsewhere, while Zhang Pengji was toying with the Red Lotus group and wrapping up the 3,000 ambushing troops, the situation in Red Lotus district quietly changed. Let's go back in time. At that time, Xueqi and the second-in-command of the Red Lotus group hit it off. The two of them colluded and caused a wave of big trouble. As a brother who had gone through life and death with the leader, the second-in-command was all too familiar with the habits of the leader. The leader was not very wary of him. When the second-in-command rushed into the deity palace with his trusted subordinates and captured the Red Lotus group leader, the leader's strong body was pressing down on the bodies of two beautiful women. He was sweating profusely, and even when he was tied up, he was still in a daze.
Looking at the second-in-command's ferocious face, then looking down at his naked black body, his cheeks alternated between red and green.
Do you want to be punished by deity? The second-in-command snorted contemptuously and raised his hand to give the man a kick. You can fool those idiots with your words, but do you think you can fool me? I even know when you wet your bed, when you first ejaculated, when you peeped on widows bathing, when you flirted with young women, when you did all those things. I know all of them. How can you say you're deity when you're like this? I'm so scared. Why don't you return to your position and send celestial soldiers and generals to kill me? Can you do that? Boasting about being the incarnation of deity? The second-in-command suppressed his anger and poured out his grievances at the leader of the Red Lotus group. He originally did not want to betray the leader of the Red Lotus group.
After all, the fact that the leader of the Red Lotus group was the incarnation of deity was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people.
Without the incarnation of deity, the Red Lotus group would only exist in name. Apart from the brainless believers, the other fence-sitters would soon scatter. However, he really couldn't stand his current life. Why was it that even though he had contributed so much to the sacred cult, all the benefits were enjoyed by the cult master in the end while he couldn't even get a sip of the meat soup? It was fine if he could not get the meat soup, but the leader of the Red Lotus group valued a scholar who only knew how to talk. The psychological imbalance, the disparity in treatment, and the fact that his position in the sect had not reached his expectations. Coupled with the restless ambition in his heart, these factors led him to take the risk out of desperation and imprison the leader of the Red Lotus group. He planned to turn the other party into a puppet that he could use as he pleased. The leader of the Red Lotus group was spat on by the other party. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. He cursed loudly. The spit was as stinky as a latrine pit. Don't be so arrogant. When the military advisor returns with his troops, it will be the day of your death. The second-in-command's heart skipped a beat. He felt a little weak, but he still put on a fierce front. He ordered his men to carefully imprison the leader of the Red Lotus group. The second-in-command kept pacing back and forth. Although he had long had the intention to rebel, it was just a strong thought and he had never put it into action. With Xueqi's help, it was like adding wings to a tiger. However, once disloyalty was not tolerated. Xueqi might betray others, but he might betray the second-in-command as well. The second-in-command seemed to put Xueqi in an important position, but he was still wary and on guard. However, the current situation was a little tricky. If he did not rely on Xueqi's ability, when the military advisor returned with the members of the Red Lotus group, it would be the day of his death. In order to survive, he had no choice but to continue working with Xueqi. The advice Xueqi gave him was also very pertinent. He spoke energetically and convinced the second-in-command wholeheartedly. The second-in-command had already taken down Red Lotus District, but the other 3 districts were still in the hands of the Red Lotus Group. The news of Jinmen District's fall had not yet spread. Whether in terms of manpower or territory, the second-in-command was no match for the Red Lotus Group. If he wanted to turn the tables, the second-in-command could only take advantage of the fact that the Red Lotus Group and Lu Shi were fighting fiercely to fish in troubled waters. He could quietly launch a sneak attack on the Red Lotus Group's territory and expand his power. In the end, Xueqi said in a bewitching tone, "At this moment, the news that you've captured the leader hasn't spread. You can take your men and horses and rush to Xueqi district.
You can use your status as the left and right protectors to deceive the county into opening the gates and welcoming you in without expending a single soldier's strength.
If you don't seize this opportunity, when the news spreads throughout Xueqi County, it will be difficult for you to take advantage of it. Opportunities are fleeting. The second-in-command was tempted. It wasn't that he couldn't control himself. It was clearly because Xueqi's tongue was as smooth as a lotus flower. He was too good at bewitching people. What should we do about Red Lotus District? The second-in-command was still suspicious of Xueqi, afraid that the other party had ulterior motives. Xueqi said, "That's easy. You can just leave a few trusted subordinates to guard the city. Red Lotus District is easy to defend and difficult to attack. It's difficult for outsiders to conquer it." He spoke naturally and gracefully, but the second-in-command felt embarrassed. After fooling the second-in-command, Xueqi did another secretive thing. He sent a beggar to inform Jiang Pengji and sent someone to Fenghu District to inform the scholar of the Red Lotus Group. The contents of the report to Jiang Pengji had already been mentioned before. The contents of the report were more meaningful. On one hand, he tearfully reprimanded the second-in-command for his wild ambition and kidnapping him to Red Lotus District. On the other hand, he said that the second-in-command planned to kidnap the leader to Xueqi District. He hoped that the scholar would immediately come to the leader's rescue for the sake of the Red Lotus Group. The Oscars didn't owe Xueqi a Best Actor. It was obvious that they owed Xueqi an extra platoon of awards. Before the first wave had subsided, another wave arose. When the scholar of the Red Lotus Group received the message from Xueqi, he almost fainted. It was precisely because of this that the scholar temporarily forgot to pursue the matter of Xueqi's plan, causing them to lose Jinmen District. For the Red Lotus Group, the leader was their backbone. If the leader, who was the incarnation of God, was gone, the Red Lotus Group, which had been strong for a while, would definitely fall apart and be counterattacked by the Tsing-Yi army. What should they do? In the end, the scholar's eyes reddened and his voice hoarse. Even if the leader wants to rescue us, we can't hand over Jinmen District to that traitor Lu for nothing. Let's split up. The discipline within the Red Lotus Group was lax. It would take at least 2 or 3 days to gather the troops and set off. Now that the leader had been captured by the traitor, they were even more disorganized. They were like headless flies flying around without any order, and their speed was even slower. As an opponent of the Red Lotus Group, Jiang Pengji maximized the word efficiency. By the time the Red Lotus Group had sent half of its troops to attack Jinmen District, Jiang Pengji had already secretly brought people to Red Lotus District. The recruits who had been temporarily transferred over were already halfway there, just in time to outflank the forces of the Red Lotus Group attacking Jinmen District from the rear. In Jinmen District, Xueqi Rang was in charge, and his defense was impenetrable. The Red Lotus Group's repeated attacks were fruitless. Chapter 646. There was a saying that went, "I like it when you hate me to the bone, when you're gnashing your teeth but can't do anything to me." Well, it didn't seem out of place when used on Xueqi Rang and the Red Lotus Group. Xueqi Rang kept a low profile, but that didn't mean he was low-key on the battlefield. On the contrary, he was quite flamboyant. When defending the city, the enemy couldn't get in. When attacking the city, it was impossible to guard against. Even though the military strength in the city was insufficient and there were many brainless believers who caused trouble, Xueqi Rang still managed to suppress the situation under such harsh conditions. With sufficient defense equipment and his command, the Red Lotus Group didn't get within 100 meters of the city gate for 3 days in a row. Every time they cursed and attacked the city, the Red Lotus Group could only leave behind hundreds or thousands of corpses. They looked at Jinmen District, which was crawling on the ground, and sighed. In less than 7 or 8 days, the situation in Xueqi County had changed several times. First, Jinmen District fell into Jiang Pengji's hands. Then, Honglian District was conquered by the second-in-command of the Red Lotus Group. After that, the rebel army of the Red Lotus Group intended to encroach on Xueqi District. They used their identities as the left and right protectors of the Red Lotus Group to deceive the guards into opening the city gate, killing them unexpectedly. They originally thought that the Red Lotus Group and Lu Shi would each occupy 1 district in Xueqi County, and the rebel army would occupy 2. Who would have thought that in just a day, the situation would undergo an earth-shattering change? Lu Shi conquered another city, and Honglian District was in his hands. Compared to Jinmen District, Honglian district was almost a piece of cake. The main reason was that Xueqi had arranged for an informant to receive them. Although Xueqi's sworn brother wasn't very cultured, he was smart and obedient. He obediently carried out Xueqi's plan. On one hand, he got the leader of the city guards drunk in the name of a banquet, and on the other, he took the opportunity to bribe the guards at the city gate. Taking advantage of the darkness of the night, he quietly opened the city gates and lured Jiang Pengji into the city. Those who were completely drunk were either tied up in their sleep, or had their heads chopped off and died on the spot. When the people in the city woke up, they realized that the flag on the city gate had been changed. Jiang Pengji had taken over Honglian district and deliberately blocked the news. The Red Lotus Group, which was staging a civil war inside and outside the city walls of Xueqi district, had no idea. The plan is going well. Have the scouts returned yet? She had taken over half of Chengde County's territory, and she was only 2 counties away from unifying Wanzhou. He's already back. This is the news gathered by the scouts. Fenghu County is now strong on the outside but weak on the inside. It seems to be heavily guarded, but in fact, it's very weak. Yang Si took out a roll of parchment from his sleeve and handed it to Jiang Pengji. Does my lord want to take down Fenghu County in one go, or do you want to delay it for a day or two? The soldiers have been marching day and night and are extremely tired. For the sake of combat strength, I suggest that we rest for a day. Jiang Pengji's battle rhythm was rather fast, but it didn't mean that she didn't know her limits. Her physical strength could keep up, and she was still alive and kicking after a few days, but those soldiers were different. For the past few days, they had spent practically all of their time in the midst of a rapid march. Even their sleep and rest had to be taken advantage of. They were truly exhausted. Let's rest for a day, Jiang Pengji said with a smile. Speaking of which, the new recruits from Fengyi County should be arriving soon. Although they've only trained for a month or two, they can still be put to good use. By the way, who's the leader? Yang Si said. Zixiao. Hearing this name, Jiang Pengji frowned and said, his health isn't good. Why is he running around in the middle of winter? Yang Si didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Although Zixiao's body is cold, he's good at the art of Qi Huang and has a lot of experience in recuperating. After recuperating for a few years, his current condition is far better than before. Don't be fooled by his frail appearance, he's not that weak inside. He's not weak in riding and archery at all. He's good at riding a horse and drawing a bow. My lord always says that he's physically weak. Actually, men don't like to hear this. Yang Si wasn't a serious person. The last sentence didn't sound like much, but an experienced person could understand the meaning behind it. However, Jiang Pengji said, I know. Yang Si was surprised. Since the lord knew that Wei Si's health wasn't that bad, why did she remind him several times? For a strategist, if the lord used his health as an excuse and repeatedly refused him to make contributions, it would be really hurtful. Jiang Pengji said again, it's to punish the monkey to warn the chicken. Yang Si was completely dumbfounded. Punish the monkey to warn the chicken? What did she mean? If the live stream was still on at this time, the experienced viewers would probably be delighted to hear it and laugh. How could the streamer's words not be clear? She was obviously spoiling the little princess on purpose and generously showing it to others. This was a mouthful of sweet dog food, and they devoured it. In his previous life, Wei Si and Qiguan Rang had been officials of the same court for more than 10 years. He also had a certain understanding of the latter. Knowing that the person guarding the city was Qiguan Rang, Wei Si already had a plan in mind to cooperate with the encirclement and suppression. He brought more than 5,000 new recruits, and Qiguan Rang had 5,000 to 6,000 veterans in the city. There were more than 10,000 people in total. The Red Lotus Group, which was shouting outside the city, had more than 36,000 people. Under Qiguan Rang's attrition, there were only slightly more than 30,000 left. If they attacked from the front and rear and caught them off guard, they might be able to defeat 30,000 enemies with just over 10,000 troops. Wei Si lowered his eyes and thought about it carefully. This plan was feasible. The Red Lotus Group was just a cult among the people. They lacked cohesion, and with Jiang Pengji's several blows, their morale had fallen to rock bottom. They did not have the determination to fight to the death. On the contrary, if they saw that the situation was not good, they would break into a run. In addition, Qiguan Rang was firmly guarding Jinmen district.
A few days of forceful attacks had not been effective. Instead, they had suffered heavy losses. The morale of the army was already lax, and their combat power was not enough to be feared. If they gave the other party a head-on blow at this time, they would definitely be able to completely destroy the morale of the Red Lotus group. As long as their military formation was completely disrupted and they flew around randomly like headless flies, they would definitely win this battle. Although Xueqi Rang's battle results were fruitful, only he knew how difficult it was inside. He did not dare to close his eyes and sleep for a few days, for fear that the Red Lotus group outside would attack the city crazily while he slept soundly. The 30,000 troops were 6 times the number of soldiers in the city. He calculated the time and felt that he would be liberated in another day or two. Xueqi was a steady person. If he sent new recruits to battle, the leader would definitely be one of the few strategists in Fengyi County. Although Zhangpengji's territory was not large, there were many top-notch talents, and some were partial. No matter who came, it would be a boost to Xueqi Rang's morale. Sure enough, at noon the next day, the reinforcements finally arrived. The Red Lotus group was still shouting and provoking below the city walls. They cussed until their throats were swollen. In the end, they could not wait any longer and chose to attack. Xueqi Rang stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. He vaguely saw that there was an unusual movement behind the Red Lotus group's army. His eyes were filled with warmth. In order to show their strength and reduce the threat of the ballistae on the city wall, the Red Lotus group had deliberately set up a large battle formation. However, this had also caused a certain delay in the transmission of their information. It was not until the sand and dust were flying in the air behind them, the shouts of killing shook the heavens, and the casualties were heavy that the Red Lotus group at the front realized that something was wrong. At this moment, Xueqi Rang sneered. Chapter 647. The flames of war spread and dust flew everywhere. The war drums rumbled like thunder, and murderous shouts resounded through the heavens. The Red Lotus group had suffered several setbacks. After splitting up their troops, they had suffered repeated losses outside Jinmen County. Their morale was low, and their will to fight was sparse. A group of enemies appeared out of nowhere and launched a sneak attack on the rear of the Red Lotus group. Xueqi Rang, who was in Jinmen County, immediately gave the order to open the city gates and send out troops to meet the Red Lotus group. This would restrain the main force at the front, making it impossible for them to take care of both the front and the rear. Under Xueqi Rang's command, the soldiers formed a military formation to break up the Red Lotus group's formation and surround and kill them. If the Red Lotus group counterattacked, they would scatter and not gather. Under Xueqi Rang's command, the Red Lotus group felt that their enemy was like a piece of sticky candy that could not be removed. Most of the main forces of the Red Lotus group were gathered at the front. Xueqi Rang stuck to them like a piece of candy, making it difficult for them to turn around and return to support the rear. Compared to Xueqi Rang's roundabout gentleness, Wei Ci appeared firm and decisive. Because of Zhangpengji's strict control, the first thing the recruits received after entering the camp was not physical training, but how to carry out orders. Therefore, even though the people Wei Ci brought were all new recruits, they carried out his orders relatively well. Even if their physical fitness and combat qualities could not be compared to the veterans, the new recruits were much stronger than the Red Lotus group members who panicked and were at a loss when they were ambushed. Wei Ci knew very well that Xueqi Rang was holding back the main force of the Red Lotus group, buying him precious time. The faster he killed, the more losses the Red Lotus group would suffer, and the less pressure Xueqi Rang would face. Therefore, in order to further expand the battle results, Wei Ci chose a rather tough offensive formation. The vanguard was like an awl, sharp and swift. It broke through and severed the already chaotic rear of the Red Lotus group. The arrangement of the soldiers on the two flanks leaned towards defense. They were strong and powerful, taking into account speed and protecting the center of the army. At the same time, they could maximize the results of the battle and reap the lives of the Red Lotus group. The archers and pikemen were in the middle, supporting the front and two flanks, shooting the enemies and clearing the obstacles. The army led by Wei Ci was like a pair of long scissors, easily tearing apart the rear of the Red Lotus group, making it impossible for the two wings to support and cooperate. Swords and sabers flashed, and arrows rained down like a tide. One by one, the corpses fell to the ground. As far as the eyes could see, there were severed limbs and broken bones. The military strength in Jinmen County, including the recruits that Wei Ci had brought with him,
totaled more than 10,000. The Red Lotus group still outnumbered them by 3 times. However, how could a place like the battlefield be won by having more people? With Wei Si's attack and Qiguan Rang's containment, the Red Lotus group suffered heavy casualties. The morale of the army was slack, and they were in disarray. They tried to make a last-ditch effort to break out of the encirclement. However, Wei Si and Qiguan Rang's cooperation was rather tacit. The latter turned from restraining the enemy to encircling them, while the former turned from attacking to driving them away. The two of them were like experienced fishermen, and the soldiers they commanded were the sturdy fishing nets they had woven. The two of them did not communicate, but their hearts were in sync. They drove the panicking Red Lotus group, the big and small fishes, to one place, and finally drew in the net. Captive. It was not until the setting sun shone on half of the horizon that Qiguan Rang reluctantly ordered his men to retreat. I thought that the person who came would be Zi Shi. Although Feng Zhan was a prodigal son and did not have a good relationship with Feng Jin, Xueqi, and the others, Qiguan Rang quite admired this guy. According to his temperament and style, he was quite suitable to lead the recruits to support Jinmen County. He had never expected that the last person to arrive would be Wei Si. Thinking about Wei Si's usual style, it was very different from his style on the battlefield just now. Qiguan Rang could not help but re-examine this gentle and weak colleague. You've hidden yourself well, big brother. Wei Si was still afraid of the cold, so he wore a few more layers than others. He also wrapped himself in a wind-proof cloak made of rabbit fur. From afar, he looked like a snowball. Just like how Yang Si felt cold when he looked at Qiguan Rang also felt a little hot when he looked at Wei Si. After hearing Qiguan Rang's words, Wei Si smiled and coughed twice. Zi Shi is busy and far away in Shangyang County, presiding over the overall situation with Huayu. Going back and forth is a waste of time, and I'm afraid that it will delay the Lord's great plan. Helpless I, an idle person with nothing to do, will help the Lord solve her worries. This was not the case. In the beginning, Feng Zhan had been eager to come. How could exhausting government affairs be as refreshing as fighting a war? However, Wei Si had a white face and a black heart. He was good at tricking his friends. From Zhang Ping, Yang Si, to Feng Zhan, when had he ever been merciful? Where is the Lord now? Wei Si had also rushed here overnight. He had no spare time to inquire about information. Qiguan Rang briefly explained the current situation on the battlefield. Jinmen County had been defended, and Honglian County could probably be deceived. Coincidentally, Wei Si had arrived, so he could lead the troops there to defend. The Red Lotus group was having a civil war in Xueqi County. Jiang Pengji and Qiguan Rang had deliberately blocked the news, so they would not know about the changes here for the time being. Jiang Pengji could use this time gap to turn around and attack Fenghu County. When the 3 counties were stabilized, she would return to deal with the remaining troops of the Red Lotus group. Wei Si kept a gentle expression and listened carefully. In his previous life, he had moved from Langya County to Zhongzhao's Bianzhou with the Wei family. As an invisible person, he was not valued, so he simply built a hut and lived in seclusion. He was still concerned about the affairs of the world, but most of the news came from Zhongzhao. As for the news of Dongqing, he only had a general idea. Perhaps the evildoer mentioned by monk Liaochen was causing trouble, stealing the fate of Dongqing and the vitality of the people, causing many things to happen in advance. In his previous life, the Red Lotus group had surfaced much later than it was now. The Red Lotus group had been preaching in the north for several years. It had accumulated countless loyal followers, and its followers were widely distributed. In the end, the leader of the Red Lotus group took advantage of the situation and revolted. He received the support of the people in the north, and the imperial court could not shake him. He suffered several losses, and the Tsing-Yi army, who revolted at the same time, could only avoid him. The current Red Lotus group was still immature, and its teachings were not deeply rooted in the people's hearts. Otherwise, it would not have been easy to take Chengde County. Did the Lord go to Xueqi County? Wei Si asked. Qiguan Rang replied, according to the time, that should be the case. Zi Xiao, fortunately you came. Otherwise, I would be really busy. Although the Red Lotus group is a motley crew, their ability to bewitch the people is not weak. In the past few days of defending the city, people have repeatedly tried to attack or bribe the guards at the city gate. On the surface, we have caught more than 22 of them,
And there are even more who have not taken action in the dark.
Wei Ci rubbed his eyebrows. It's best not to keep these stubborn followers around, lest they spoil our plans. A rat's droppings can spoil a whole pot of porridge. Who knows when these foolish people, whose brains have been brainwashed, will cause a disaster. The Red Lotus group should indeed be eliminated. Thinking of his previous life, Wei Ci's expression became inexplicably gloomy. There was a hidden murderous intent in his eyes, and even his gentle face turned cold. Understanding the meaning of Wei Ci's words, Xueqi frowned slightly. Chapter 648. In Wei Ci's previous life, when Her Majesty established the Zhang dynasty, there was constant turmoil in the early days of the country's founding. There were natural disasters everywhere, and the remnants of the Red Lotus group took the opportunity to stir up trouble and revive. Although they did not cause much damage, they brought a certain gray haze to the new dynasty and made people panic. There were even some bold rebels who spread rumors that the Empress was a temptress, and they even tried to assassinate her several times. Even the death of His Majesty had something to do with the Red Lotus group if one got to the bottom of it. Every time he thought of this, Wei Ci felt that he could not control his emotions. But Xueqi was slightly hesitant. Wei Ci's thin lips parted slightly, and there was a tinge of coldness. The battlefield is chaotic, and the rebels intend to open the city for the Red Lotus group. Isn't it normal for the troops to die in the chaos? If they did not deal with such unstable people as soon as possible, were they supposed to stay for the new year? Xueqi had wanted to leave them for Zhang Pengji to deal with, but Wei Ci's words made sense. The more unstable elements were left, the more risks there would be. It was better to eliminate them completely. Wei Ci thought of something and said, "Previously, my lord promised Shui that after the war, she would give him 10% of his wealth and manpower. Wen Zhang has already screened the captives. Keep the useful ones. It's better to get rid of the others who are stubborn and extreme." Wei Ci did not want Zhang Pengji to get involved in something as damaging as killing captives. It was better to leave this to Shui. Based on Shui's abilities and the Red Lotus group's suicidal style, the latter would definitely step on the former's bottom line. When Shui was done with this group of people, what awaited the Red Lotus group would be killing the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Wei Ci did not feel the slightest pain in his conscience to leave this hidden danger to Shui. Xueqi keenly noticed that Wei Ci had stressed the words, stubborn and extreme. When choosing captives, most of them were strong, young, and healthy. The old, weak, sick, and disabled were not considered. But Wei Ci had made his attitude clear. He did not want those with ideological problems. Their physiques and limbs were in good condition instead. This abnormality made Xueqi curious, but it also made him a little more vigilant. Wei Ci knew that Xueqi was suspicious, so he explained, "The teachings of the Red Lotus group were inherited from a certain evil cult during the period of the 16 kingdoms. Wen Zhang is well read, so he naturally knows how many evil cults caused trouble in the early days of the Great Xia dynasty's unification of the 16 kingdoms. They had risen from the ashes several times, fanned the flames, instigated the common people, and caused chaos. They had to guard against the Red Lotus group. If there's something wrong with your brain, don't take them." This reason could indeed convince Xueqi. Let's not talk about the distant lands. Just the Buddhism and Taoism, which were now on equal footing, had believers all over the 5 countries. The Red Lotus group could not be compared to these 2 giants. However, the 3 were all religions, and they could vaguely see each other's shadows. Although Buddhism and Taoism were not forces in the traditional sense, their influence on the general trend of the world could not be ignored. If the Red Lotus group could have such a large number of believers and incite trouble everywhere, it would indeed be quite annoying. Xueqi nodded in agreement. "All right, I'll remember this." This battle could be considered an unprecedented victory. There were a total of more than 23,000 captives. The others were either killed on the spot or died from serious injuries. Those who were still breathing were transported to the military base for treatment. The women's camp temporarily transferred a large number of people, but they were still very busy. Xueqi sent people to clean up the battlefield, clean up the corpses, search for those who were still breathing, and retrieve the arrows that could still be used. Although his lord was a local tycoon, fighting a war was too costly. He had to save as much as he could. In the following days,
The busiest place would probably be the medical district. Those with superficial wounds would be fine after they were cleaned and bandaged. After their injuries were healed, they would be able to jump around and receive military merits. Those with broken hands and feet, abdominal cavities opened by barrels, broken bones embedded in internal organs, and large pieces of flesh cut off. The doctors could do nothing about such serious injuries. They could only do their best. Whether the patients lived or died was up to fate. There were also some who could not endure it and died from the pain. In fact, the large number of casualties did not occur on the battlefield, but after the war. Too many people died from serious injuries. Even if they survived, if the wound came into contact with dirt during the healing period, it would easily fester, making the wound unable to heal, and they would die. Fortunately, it was still winter. The temperature was not that hot and humid, and the probability of the wound becoming inflamed and festering was greatly reduced. However, the death rate was still higher than the survival rate. On the other side, Jiang Pengji ordered people to rest for a day before setting out to attack Fenghu County according to the plan. Coincidentally, the day before the attack on Fenghu County was the New Year's Day. Before setting out, Jiang Pengji had already ordered people to buy enough pigs and sheep from the people with money or rice grains of the same amount. On the day of the New Year's Day, the soldiers in charge of the kitchen slaughtered the pigs and sheep. The pig's blood was collected and condensed into blood clots, which were prepared to be used as food. The internal organs were processed and the stench was removed. They were cooked with ingredients and spices and made into cooked dishes. The pig bones were boiled into a thick white bone soup. The soup base was spices. The smell of the bone broth was so strong that it could almost drift into Fenghu County. As for the other pork and mutton, the various parts were divided. Some were directly boiled in plain water, while some were added with black fungus and stewed into a pot of stew. Just looking at the color made people salivate. Dry fried pork ribs with salt and pepper, dry fried pork shreds, kung pao pork cubes, or cut the pork into minced meat and wrapped it into meat buns. In addition to these, there was also some raw meat and cut bamboo sticks. The soldiers could skewer the meat themselves and roast it over the fire. As for the rice prepared by the kitchen, it was cooked with a meat broth that had been prepared beforehand. It's the Children's Day. Everyone, eat to your heart's content. Those were Jiang Pengji's original words. The march was tough, but such a sumptuous meal was rare even during the New Year. The soldiers formed groups of 3 to 5 and ate their New Year's Eve dinner around the bonfire. There was a rack on the bonfire and a pot was hooked. In the pot, all kinds of mountain products and meat pieces were cooked. The fresh and tender soup made a gurgling sound. When the hot soup and rice entered the stomach, the whole person felt warm. In contrast, Fenghu County was deserted. There were strong troops stationed outside the city. Even though it was New Year's Eve, almost no one celebrated. The most pitiful ones were the soldiers guarding the city. They squatted on the high city wall. The thin and shabby clothes on their bodies did not have much resistance to the cold. Their stomachs were empty. They were so hungry that they were in pain. They were singing the empty city stratagem. Many people could not help but look into the distance. There was the camp that Jiang Pengji's army had set up. They could not see anything else, but they could see the leaping and burning flames. They sniffed hard. There was a faint aroma of food in the air. Even though they were so far away, they seemed to be able to hear the lively sounds coming from there. "It's so good," a soldier guarding the city murmured in a low voice with deep envy. He simulated the taste of delicious food in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more saliva he secreted. Finally, he swallowed his saliva in big mouthfuls. The sound of thunder rumbled in his stomach. In Fenghu County, the leader of the Red Lotus group, who was guarding the city, received a report from outside the city. Chapter 649. Although he wanted to attack at night to teach Jiang Pengji a lesson, the leader of the Red Lotus group also knew that this plan was not feasible. First of all, it was New Year's Eve tonight, but a strong enemy was eyeing them covetously outside the city. No one was in the mood to celebrate. Secondly, the people in the city had been tricked by the Red Lotus group into saving and plundering their wealth. Now they were penniless. Although they were not as miserable as having no food to eat, the quality of the food was not good. They could not even taste meat on New Year's Eve, which made the festive season even worse. No mood, no vigor, no motivation.
Sneak attack the enemy's camp? Haha. Quoting the words of the viewers in the streaming room, even Liang Jingru did not dare to give them the courage. Finally, Jiang Pengji's camp was very unique. It was obvious that she was experienced and could not find a suitable gap for a sneak attack. The soldiers on night patrol did not dare to slack off. Even though it was a lively New Year's Eve, they still had no intention of slacking off. The feasibility of a night attack was not high. This would not work, that would not work. The leader of the Red Lotus group was so angry that he swept the delicacies and wine on the table to the ground. Jiang Pengji dared to delay the attack for a day, so she was naturally not afraid of their night attack. If they dared to come over, she would kindly accept. Alcohol was prohibited in the military camp. Even on New Year's Eve, they were not allowed to touch the smell of alcohol. As the commander-in-chief, Jiang Pengji naturally had to set an example. Drinking plain water was enough. As for rice wine, it was better to fill in the blanks in her head. Jiang Pengji sat in the tent. There were a few plates of side dishes on the table. From the appearance to the taste, it was exactly the same as what the soldiers ate. From the beginning of the New Year's Eve dinner, the viewers in the streaming room uniformly sent Jiang Pengji New Year's blessings. Since the start of the streaming room, many viewers had developed feelings for her by following the stream. Now that they had accompanied Jiang Pengji for another year, many fans in the streaming room even spontaneously organized a New Year's Eve concert. Although she couldn't hear them, she could feel their passion through the dense bullet screen. Looking at the lively streaming room, then looking at the cold commander's tent, she could not help but sigh. This new year is really miserable. Thinking back to last year, we should be eating barbecue and hot pot around the long table by now. Jiang Pengji ate until she was half full. The taste of the big pot was just For someone who was used to eating delicacies, it was definitely difficult to swallow, but she was not picky. She ate it all with a normal expression, and there was not a single grain of rice left in the ceramic. I really do not want war during New Year, Yang Si deeply agreed. As a picky foodie, cutting off his delicacies was the same as cutting off one's addiction. When the addiction kicks in, how uncomfortable would it be without hanchi powder? Just ask Feng Zhen, who was weeping after giving up. During the New Year's Eve dinner, Yang Si and Dian Yan sat on either side of the table. Jiang Nongqin was left in Honglian County to hold the fort, so she was not in the tent. Yang Si said with a smile, "Only when there is a comparison can one know who is better. My lord, why don't you think about the thieves in Fenghu County? Maybe your mood will be much better." Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand. By the way, will they attack the camp in the middle of the night? The possibility is very small. Yang Si said firmly, "Even so, for the sake of prudence, we still have to strengthen the patrolling and defense of the camp." Setting up a camp was a skill. If the camp was set up well, it would be difficult for the enemy to launch a sneak attack. Jiang Pengji did not do much research in this area. Fortunately, there was Yang Si. He could make up for the shortcomings in this aspect. In addition, the patrols were strict. Even if the Red Lotus group really launched a sneak attack in the middle of the night, they would be able to react quickly. All the soldiers in the camp ate to their heart's content. Delicacies could soothe negative emotions and more or less dispel the depressing atmosphere of the New Year's war. Thinking about conquering the enemy tomorrow, besides some melancholy and longing, they were more excited. Tomorrow was the first day of the new year. If they could conquer Fenghu County, it would be a good start for the whole year. The New Year's Eve dinner lasted until the moon was high in the sky. The soldiers who were not on patrol duty went to bed early to recuperate and fight the next day. The soldiers who were on duty gathered together to frolic, fight, and fight to kill time. Because they did not make much noise, they did not disturb the sleeping others. Jiang Pengji always wore her armor in the military camp. She came out and took a look at the camp. The soldiers she met saluted her. After inquiring about the situation everywhere, Jiang Pengji walked to the front of the camp and looked at the shadow on the ground in the distance. It was like a giant beast. She knew that it was Fenghu County. After conquering Fenghu County and then Xueqi County, Wanzhou would completely become her territory. She had just taken the first step on the road to hegemony. She meditated and calmed the complicated emotions in her heart. While she meditated and cultivated, she sorted out the clues in her mind and reorganized the plan to unify the world. Not long after, she heard footsteps behind her. She knew who it was at first glance. Jing Rong. She spoke in a declarative tone.
Xueqi said, I saw my lord leave the commander's tent just now and come here alone.
Do you miss your family? Zhang Pengji let out an ah and was puzzled.
Why would I miss my family?
Xueqi choked. He thought that Zhang Pengji was young and that she was alone in a faraway place during the New Year's Eve. Looking at the lively scene around her, it might arouse the young man's longing for his family. He came over to be quite a considerate brother. But why didn't he follow the script? Understanding what Xueqi meant, Zhang Pengji did not know whether to laugh or cry. I'm an adult, not a 3-year-old child. It was Xueqi's turn to be dumbfounded.
Then my lord is now. Her eyes were firm.
I'm meditating and sorting out the plan. After we take down Chengde County, we'll take a short break and go to rescue the king. Rescue the king. I don't know how many heroes we'll meet then. Whether they're enemies or allies, we'll be invincible if we know ourselves and our enemies. Xueqi responded with an oh, and was slightly embarrassed. Just as he was about to find an excuse to leave so as not to disturb Zhang Pengji's thoughts, his lord raised a very strange question. Jingrong, I had a strange dream last night.
I dreamed that a hen crowed and heralded the dawn.
Xueqi frowned. A hen heralding the dawn? Isn't this a woman usurping the dawn? It's a sign of disaster. However, the dream is strange and doesn't count. He was a little worried. Did the Lord think that the dream was ominous and that there would be changes in the battle tomorrow? Don't be superstitious. A woman usurping the dawn. People often use this as a metaphor for a woman usurping power and creating chaos in the world.
It's a bad omen,
Zhang Pengji said and lowered her eyes. What do you think of this? Xueqi was surprised. How did the topic turn to this? He was also a rebellious person. His thoughts were very different from the literati of the time. He said, in my opinion, a woman usurping the dawn and a woman in power are still different. The crow of a hen is against the natural order and common sense, but it's not the case for a woman in power. Looking at the 16 countries and the previous dynasty, it's not like there haven't been women in power and being officials for hundreds of years. If a woman usurps the dawn, it's an insult to the ancestors. There was a period of time in the previous dynasty when women were officials and were in power. However, as times changed, the atmosphere became more and more rigorous and harsh. The narrow term, a woman usurping the dawn, was recognized by more and more people. More people felt that it was ridiculous for a woman to be in power. It was like a woman usurping the dawn. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, what if a woman becomes the emperor in the world? Do you think it's normal? Xueqi had a strange expression on his face. His lord was not only ambitious, but her confidence was also rare in the world. He smiled and asked quietly, listening to what you mean, my lord, do you want to pass the throne to your daughter after you become the emperor? It's not necessarily impossible. Chapter 650. Not necessarily? This was probably the funniest joke Xueqi had heard in a while. At this point, he still thought that Zhang Pengji was joking with him.
He went with the flow and teased. If that's the case, my lord has to work harder.
Zhang Pengji raised her eyebrows and asked him, what do you mean work harder? My lord is about to turn 9 soon, and it's only 2 years before she turns 20. In other people's families, even if they didn't get married, the marriage would have already been decided. On the other hand, the lord was still alone. This was not acceptable. If I don't marry a wife, how can I have a daughter? If he didn't have a daughter, how could he pass the throne to his daughter? Xueqi teased with a smile. His words were not to encourage Zhang Pengji to work hard to fight for the throne. He was clearly teasing her, telling her to quickly get married and have children. Zhang Pengji would be 18 in 2 months. 18 was old enough to start a family and become a father in that era. However, rich families were particular about many things. Most of them would delay it until after the coronation ceremony. The Lu residence should not be an exception. In Xueqi's opinion, his lord was still a young and immature youth who had not come into contact with the matters between men and women. When he was of age, he would naturally think about it. However, according to Xueqi's script, after being teased like this, his lord should be blushing and her heart palpitating. She would be extremely embarrassed. In fact, Zhang Pengji raised her eyebrows and said calmly, well, there's no rush. Bearing children depends on the partner and the timing. Xueqi was surprised. From the looks of it, his lord wasn't an innocent young man who didn't understand human relations. He was clearly an experienced veteran. He gossiped. Depends on the partner and the timing? Could it be that my lord has taken a fancy to someone? Zhang Pengji's lips curled into a mysterious smile. Indeed. Xueqi asked curiously, which family is she from? If their statuses were comparable, they could ask the old master to come forward and arrange the marriage for their lord. This was a major event in his life, so he couldn't afford to be careless. The faster the hand, the slower the hand, the faster the hand, the stronger the hand. That was the only logical thing to do. If his status was lower than the lord, he could send an iceman to the door and explain his intention to take a concubine. In short, it's best not to miss out on a young lady you like. Zhang Pengji laughed involuntarily. She didn't know that apart from being gluttonous, Xueqi also had a tendency to gossip. Amused, she rolled her eyes and said vaguely, "Status? Although my family is in decline, I have a clean background. My ancestors were once illustrious, so I can be considered a noble family." That person is quite talented, and her personality is quite cute. It's not fair to be a concubine. Xueqi frowned. A noble family. This was indeed a little difficult. Better be a poor man's wife than a rich man's concubine. The nobler the family, the more importance they placed on their status. She would rather choose her husband's wife who was of the same birth as her. Very few people were willing to be a concubine in order to climb up the social ladder, unless her husband's family was of a higher status. Obviously, Xueqi had not reached that level yet. What does Lord like about her? Xueqi asked. Talent or appearance? Zhang Pengji smiled and squinted her eyes. His genes. Chicken sound? Xueqi couldn't wrap his head around it. The curve was too big, and he almost flipped over. What is a rooster's voice? Zhang Pengji pinched her chin. How could she explain this? She couldn't. Genes. They're the most essential thing in life. Zhang Pengji thought about it and muttered, but genes are only one aspect. His genes are indeed very attractive to me, but what interests me is his temperament and the secrets he hides. How do I describe that feeling? He's obviously full of loopholes, and it's no different from burying his head in the sand, but he still stubbornly wants to hide it. He looks so cute. Xueqi was dumbfounded. He could understand every word that his lord said, but when they were put together, he couldn't understand them. Zhang Pengji concluded. He's easy to bully. I like to bully him, but he's tolerant and doesn't do anything. What I like can only be mine. Xueqi was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a while, he broke out in laughter. Lord, if you really like the young lady, you can't do this. It's easy to scare her. Previously, he thought that his lord was a skilled and knowledgeable veteran. Now that he saw it, he was clearly a domineering young man who didn't understand love. Zhang Pengji asked him, "How should I pursue her?" Xueqi thought about it and said, "If my lord really likes her, why don't you discuss it with the old master and ask him to come forward and propose marriage? Since she's from a noble family, she's probably well educated. Although my lord's actions show that you like her, in the eyes of the young lady, it's clearly frivolous and flirting. Even if my lord is very good, after such actions, the young lady's impression of my lord will at most be 1 or 2 points." Zhang Pengji clicked her tongue, somewhat disapproving. He's quite open-minded by nature. He shouldn't misunderstand, right? That's not necessarily true. Xueqi added, young girls are meticulous and tend to get into a dead end. Zhang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and thought about it. She said, "Is that so? Listen, Jingrong is quite experienced." Xueqi sneered. He had eaten more than 10 years of rice than Zhang Pengji. How could he not know? If my lord asks Zhi, he's more experienced. However, he's an unruly wastrel. I don't recommend adopting his suggestion. Xueqi conveniently smeared Feng Zhen's name. Who asked Feng Zhen to be so wastrel? Zhang Pengji thought for a long time. Finally she said, "It's still early. Let's talk about it in another 5 or 6 years. I'm not in a hurry. I'm quite enjoying my current state." Xueqi did not suspect anything strange. In his opinion,
The young lady that his lord liked was estimated to be only 11 or 12 years old. In another 5 or 6 years, she would be of the right age to marry. As a man, he should prioritize his family, country, and career. It was fine for his lord to get married a little later. It was fine if he fell in love with someone else after a few years. A man would not have to worry about not having a wife. Little did he know that under Jiang Pengji's deliberate guidance, the content of their conversation was completely different. It was clearly a chicken talking to a duck, but they could still talk about the same thing. In that case, I'll wait for my lord's little princess to come to this world. Yang Si smiled and teased. Jiang Pengji said, "Deal. I just hope that you won't cry when the time comes." Before dawn broke, Jiang Pengji returned to her tent to take a nap. When the golden light pierced through the thick clouds and shone on the earth, the sound of a horn sounded in the camp. Not far away, the people of Fenghu County, who had been in fear all night, felt as if they had been electrocuted. They were so scared that their hair stood on end. Jiang Pengji gathered the troops and arranged them in battle formation outside the city. The cold wind whistled and the banners fluttered. One side's morale was high, while the other side was increasingly depressed. When the war drums sounded, the archers responded with arrows to cover the scaling ladders. The soldiers hid under the scaling ladders and pushed the scaling ladders closer to the city walls. Because of the urgency of the march and the limited supplies they could carry, they did not bring catapults to attack the city this time. Relying on the cover of waves of arrows, corpses continued to fall from the city walls, and the scaling ladders were successfully placed on the city walls. When the leader of the Red Lotus group heard the war drums outside the city, he hurriedly put on his armor and climbed up the city walls. An arrow that flew over almost pierced the bun on the top of his head. Why are they fighting now? The leader glared angrily. The enemies below the city walls were densely packed, one group after another. His scalp tingled when he saw them. Chapter 651. We can't defend. The dull sound of arrows piercing flesh, the wails and screams of the battlefield, and the buzzing sound of arrows piercing through the air. The incomparably noisy sounds converged into a symphony of death. The soldier's head was covered in blood, and after he finished speaking with tears in his eyes, an arrow pierced through his chest. Smash them all. Smash them down. We must not let these rebels climb up the city wall. The leader of the Red Lotus group shrank in the back, his face full of fear. He roared at the top of his lungs as he pushed the others to the front line. We have to defend even if we can't. Whoever dares to retreat will be killed. The best way to deal with enemies climbing the ladders was to use heavy objects or sharp weapons to hit their vital points or hands. The defending side did not even need to kill them on the spot. They only needed to get them down from the ladders. The height of the city wall alone was enough to kill them. However, Yang Si was very cunning. He let the soldiers carry thick shields and pretend to climb the ladders. They did not need to climb too high. They only needed to climb halfway to lure the Red Lotus group on the city wall. When they attacked the soldiers climbing the ladders with stones or other sharp weapons, the archers below the city wall would specifically shoot at those soldiers. The war drums were like thunder. The strong sound of the drums resounded through the sky, stirring the blood in one's chest and causing it to surge. Jiang Pengji rode on Little White's back. Her red clothes and silver armor were particularly conspicuous under the sun. She frowned and said, "Jingrong, although your lord has some spare money, I'm not as rich as a country. Can you be more diligent and thrifty?" The arrows were not endless. From her point of view, every wave of arrows that were shot out was like shining silver. It would be fine if they could successfully attack the city, but if they could not attack it for the time being, those arrows could not be recovered. Even if some could be recovered after cleaning up the battlefield, the arrows would also be used up. Every time they fought, they would lose 10 to 20% of their arrows. It was so expensive that it hurt. Yang Si smiled and said, "Wait a little longer. When their morale has completely collapsed, this city wall of a few feet will be easily breached." Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes. She clamped Little White's belly. "Go!" Little White roared and rushed to the battlefield at the speed of lightning. Yang Si was about to raise his hand to stop it, but Little White had already carried the people away, leaving only the dust it raised. As they galloped, Jiang Pengji removed the bow and arrow from the back of the horse. For this bow, pulling the bowstring to a full moon would require more than 2 stones of strength. He knocked an arrow and drew his bow, aiming at the flag fluttering in the wind. A silver light pierced through the air. The arrow carried with it an unstoppable momentum. With a dong sound, it pierced through the flagpole, and the huge flag fell down with a loud bang. If he wanted to completely crush their morale, why did he need to waste so much time? Either they would take the head of the enemy general or they would cut down their flag. These were both ways to thoroughly humiliate the enemy and destroy their morale. Xueqi saw the fallen flag of the Red Lotus group and laughed involuntarily. He adjusted his plan and attacked the city with all his might. The Red Lotus group on the city wall had basically lost their will to fight. After paying a small price, Pengji's soldiers carried their thick shields and climbed up the city wall one after another. The two sides were engaged in a chaotic battle. The scene was chaotic and bloody. It was like a Jura hell, making people lose all rationality. Amidst the chaos, the city gates opened wide. Pengji held the long spear in her hand and rode her horse into the city. They fought from early morning until noon, and it was as if the white clouds in the sky were dyed scarlet. If someone surrendered, their hands were tied. If they resisted, they were killed on the spot. In less than half a month, the situation in Xueqi County had undergone earth-shattering changes. At this point, Jinmen County, Fenghu County, and Red Lotus County were all included in Pengji's territory. Xueqi County is still missing. After the war, Xueqi sent people to clean up the battlefield and settle the wounded soldiers, the bodies of the dead soldiers, and the prisoners of war. When he could finally breathe a sigh of relief, Pengji had already washed up and taken off her heavy armor. She was sitting in the main hall, drinking tea and resting. Xueqi was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. Even the clothes he was wearing were from 2 days ago. He had no time to wash up and tidy up. Yes, we're still missing Xueqi County. Why don't you wait quietly for a few more days, my lord? Wait for the Red Lotus group to fight internally and exhaust each other? Pengji frowned and said, I want to wait, but I can't wait to rescue the emperor. Xueqi was also helpless. If it weren't for the rescue of the emperor, they would have waited until the beginning of spring before attacking Xueqi County. Now they were forced to start a war a few days before the New Year's Day. It was one thing for the soldiers to be unable to celebrate the festival with their families, but some of them had to sacrifice their lives. Pengji continued, sooner or later, the Red Lotus group will be annexed. Sitting idly by and watching them exhaust each other in their internal strife is tantamount to exhausting our strength. Xueqi was so choked that he couldn't speak. The meaning of his lord's words was clear. The Red Lotus group will be mine sooner or later. The more internal strife they have now, the more losses I will suffer when I obtain it. However, the Red Lotus group is not completely finished yet. Is it really okay for my lord to be so concerned about it? Take a break and reorganize. Send troops to Xueqi County. Yes. Pengji, Qiguan rang, and the others deliberately blocked the news. The Red Lotus group received the news relatively late. How late was it? She had already conquered Fenghu County. The Red Lotus group in Xueqi County was still in a standoff inside and outside the city, cursing incessantly. In order to stall for time, Chui racked his brains to give advice to the second-in-command of the Red Lotus group. Compared to the twisted intestines of a top strategist, Chui could be considered honest and straightforward. Compared to the brainless boorish men of the Red Lotus group, Chui felt that his IQ could crush everyone present. With his help, the second-in-command deceived the city gates of Xueqi County into opening and captured it. After capturing Xueqi County, he was about to dispatch troops to Honglian County, but the troops were blocked at the city gates. The people who surrounded them were none other than the military counselor of the Red Lotus group. The scholar personally led the troops and surrounded Xueqi County. As he cursed, he asked the second-in-command to return the leader. The two sides confronted each other and were in a stalemate. Chui took the opportunity to sow discord and upset the balance between the two sides. War was on the verge of breaking out. As for him, for the sake of his life, Chui had packed his luggage early and fled with a few of his brothers amid the chaos, slipping away. The second-in-command and the scholar's eyes were bloodshot. How could they have noticed Chui's existence? When they discovered that Chui had escaped and vanished from the face of the earth, news of Honglian County and Xueqi County successively being conquered arrived. What? Honglian County has been lost? When did this happen? The second-in-command stood up in shock. Because he had risen in such a hurry, he felt dizzy and almost fainted from anger. The soldier who had delivered the news was pale as he stammered out the time. When the second-in-command heard this, his eyes rolled back, and his sturdy body collapsed to the ground. Everyone panicked. They pinched and slapped him. After a while, they finally woke him up. How is this possible? The second-in-command felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The coldness seeped into his bones. If the intelligence was correct, Honglian County had fallen on the same day that he had arrived at Xueqi County. The guards of Honglian County were not weak. How could Thief Lu attack Honglian County without making a sound? Moreover, it had been a few days since it had been conquered. Why did the news only arrive now? Chapter 652. Although the scholar wasn't smart, he wasn't completely brainless. I want some time alone. This is a trap. What's wrong? The scholar gritted his teeth in pain. He felt nauseous, and sweat oozed out of his pores. His mind was muddled, like a messy ball of yarn that couldn't be cut. He couldn't find any clues. Faced with this situation, the scholar subconsciously wanted to ask Xueqi for advice. No. Xueqi. The scholar felt a flash of inspiration in his mind. His blocked and muddled mind suddenly became clear. He knew what was wrong. It was Xueqi. The scholar gripped the handrail tightly, barely supporting his body from falling. His eyes were fierce and full of murderous intent. He gritted his teeth and found someone to secretly contact Xueqi. If Xueqi hadn't offered several strategies, how could the situation be like this? This scoundrel seemed to be thinking for the Red Lotus group, but in reality, he had hidden evil intentions. He wanted to kill the entire group. This was probably the smartest moment of the scholar's life. Many seemingly inconspicuous details became abnormally clear. Xueqi had initially determined that Lu Shi and his group would attack Fenghu County first because the mountain road to Fenghu County was short, making it convenient for a sneak attack. And the result? The scholar believed in Xueqi's inference and withdrew the garrison of Jinmen County. He guarded Fenghu County with fear and trepidation, but the result was that Jinmen County was lost that night. The 3,000 soldiers sent by the scholar to ambush failed and were seen through by Lu Shi. In the end, they suffered a double loss. Before Jinmen County fell, Xueqi went to Red Lotus County. Not long after, the second-in-command betrayed the leader and occupied Red Lotus County. After that, the scholar received a secret letter from Xueqi. The letter told him that the leader of the Red Lotus group had been captured by the second-in-command and taken to Xueqi County. The scholar had no choice but to split his troops into two. One would attack Jinmen County, and the other would rush to Xueqi County to save the leader. When the scholar led his troops and the second-in-command's rebel army in Xueqi County confronted each other and restrained each other, Red Lotus County fell and Fenghu County was taken. It seemed that not only had Xueqi played him, but the stupid second-in-command had also been played by Xueqi. Without Xueqi's secret help, how could Red Lotus County have fallen so quickly? Understanding this, the scholar felt a sweetness in his throat. The taste of iron rose from his throat, and he fainted from anger. Military counselor. Counselor. Military advisor. Advisor? Someone. Call the doctor over. The scholar's face was pale, and his body was on the verge of collapse. It was a heart-wrenching sight. When he spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground, scaring the crowd even more. The scene was chaotic and out of control. As for the culprit behind all this? Seeing that the situation was not good, Xueqi had already used the cicada-shedding carapace to escape with his sworn brothers. The dark-faced man asked in a low, muffled voice, "Big brother, do you think that Lu Shi will keep his promise?" Xueqi was wearing a large winter cloak. He stood outside the cave and looked into the distance. His eyes seemed to pierce through the mountains and land on Xueqi County. Lu Shi will keep his promise. I don't think he would dare. Big brother has been so busy with Lu Shi's affairs these past few days that he's lost weight. The corners of Xueqi's lips curled up, and a sharpness appeared in his eyes. His previous dispiritedness had been swept away, and he vaguely carried a trace of high spirits that he hadn't seen in a long time. He knew very well how many troops the Red Lotus group had. There were at least 50,000 captives that Lu Shi had captured. According to the agreement of 10 men and horses, and Xueqi could get 5,000 to 6,000 men and horses, as well as a generous sum of provisions and money. With these assets, and Xueqi also had the capital to join the rescue of the emperor in Dongqing. If it was done properly, he might be able to borrow more troops and rope in more top talents. When that time came, he must kill his way back to his homeland and make the traitors of the 4 factions of Nanman pay with their blood.
Thinking of this, countless scattered scenes flashed before his eyes.
Each scene was filled with terrified screams, spreading blood, crying of despair, the wanton laughter of the enemy, the raised butcher's knife, rolling heads, broken limbs, and scattered internal organs. Since he was born, and Xueqi had been the noble son of the An family. He was the favored son of God that everyone sought after.
When had he ever suffered such humiliation?
These were the sins of the 4 factions of Nanman.
Naturally, they had to be paid with blood. As long as Xueqi was still alive, he would never let go of this hatred.
With him there would be no Nanman.
And Xueqi's sworn brothers looked at each other. They knew that their eldest brother was beginning to reminisce about the past again. They had just conquered the 3 districts of Red Lotus, Fenghu, and Jinmen, and their foundations were not yet stable. The Red Lotus group had been developing in Chengde County for many years and had many brainless believers. In order not to fail, Jiang Pengji ordered Qiguan Rang and the others to consolidate their foundations and integrate the troops. At the same time, they had a deeper understanding of the situation in the 3 districts.
They had to understand the ins and outs of the situation so that they could prescribe the right medicine in the future. After all, brainless believers were in the minority.
Most of the people still followed blindly. The former was incurable, but the latter could still be saved. For the common people, it didn't matter who the officials were. What mattered was whether the officials could bring them a good life, whether they could provide them with a place of protection in this chaotic world.
As long as they understood the problems of the people in the 3 districts and prescribed the right medicine, they would know that following Jiang Pengji was far more promising than following the Red Lotus group.
The people would naturally submit to her. Of course. The Red Lotus group's methods of brainwashing its believers inspired Jiang Pengji. The Red Lotus group could use deals and propaganda to discredit others and build momentum for the sacred group. Naturally, Jiang Pengji could do the same. This method could also be used in the military camp to teach loyalty to the soldiers. Hadn't the audience in the live stream recommended the position of political commissar to her? However, the position of political commissar required someone with a certain level of knowledge. What Jiang Pengji lacked the most at the moment was intermediate talents, so she could only put this plan aside. However, there was no need for such high-end talents to brainwash the people, and there was no need to wait for the implementation in the future. During the period of rest and reorganization, Jiang Pengji was not idle. Jingrong, come over and take a look. What do you think of this nursery rhyme? Jiang Pengji was dressed in brown linen clothes. Her long hair draped over her shoulders without a crown. She looked a little unrestrained and romantic. It was extremely rude and unrestrained to go out and meet guests without a crown. It was almost equivalent to sitting in front of others. However, looking at her long jet-black hair that was still damp, it seemed that she had just taken a bath. Yongxi swallowed the words that he was about to blurt out and said, "The weather is cold now. How can my lord not take care of your body?" The colder the weather was, the more important it was to keep warm. Jiang Pengji grabbed her long wet hair and raised her eyelids carelessly. "My body is very good. I don't have any minor disasters or illnesses all year round. Moreover, there is a charcoal brazier in the house, so it's very warm." After she finished speaking, she handed the roll of bamboo slips in her hand to Yongxi. Yongxi took it and looked at it. "What is this? This is a nursery rhyme?" The handwriting on the bamboo slips was vigorous and powerful. The words were written in bold and flamboyant calligraphy. One could not help but sigh with emotion. The words were like the person. Chapter 653. In Jiang Pengji's opinion, those stubborn believers were like ticking time bombs. They must not be allowed to live. However, what about those weak-willed fence-sitters? Could Jiang Pengji kill them all one by one? Obviously, this was impossible. Since they were fence-sitters, why not pull them over to her side? I plan to let the child beggars in the 3 counties sing this nursery rhyme everywhere. I don't believe that the Red Lotus group can cause any trouble. In fact,
This nursery rhyme was the result of a discussion between Jiang Pengji and the 150,000 idle spectators. It was simple, easy to understand, and catchy. With Jiang Pengji's manipulation behind the scenes, she was not afraid that it would not be sung well enough. Even if the illiterate old woman heard it, she could easily understand the meaning behind it. Yang Si thought about it carefully. It was indeed feasible. Most of the people were ignorant and did not have their own judgment. If the Lord killed all the stubborn believers of the Red Lotus group in a thunderous manner, it would inevitably provoke a crusade from the outside world. They would say that the Lord was cruel and heartless. In this way, the Red Lotus group would be whitewashed and become a white lotus that was bullied by evil forces. The real good people would be attacked by the common people. Instead of that, it was better to occupy the moral high ground. Jiang Pengji could not portray herself as a weak person, but she could portray herself as a savior of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Yang Si's eyes flickered slightly. He thought about it and borrowed a brush and ink to write another nursery rhyme on the bamboo slip. The nursery rhyme Jiang Pengji wrote was to expose the Red Lotus group, while the nursery rhyme Yang Si wrote was to eulogize Fengyi County. In Yang Si's opinion, it was not enough to attack and expose the evil deeds of the Red Lotus group in Chengde County and let the people see the true colors of the Red Lotus group. They had to add fuel to the fire. Would they follow the Red Lotus group and be exploited and bullied, or would they follow Lu Shi and live a good life? Obviously, one would know which to choose even if they thought with their toes. In just 2 or 3 days, the 2 nursery rhymes spread from Fenghu County to Honglian County and Jinmen County. They could be heard in the streets and alleys. At first, it was just child beggars and naughty children who liked to join in on the fun. Later, there were some people who had been exploited by the Red Lotus group and had a hard time surviving. Although it had not been long since they were sung, the situation in the city had obviously improved a lot. The most obvious point was that there were fewer brainless believers who tormented them. Qiguan Rang often breathed a sigh of relief. Without the foolish people who were tormenting him, he could also put his extra effort elsewhere. Now, the main force of the Red Lotus group was gathered in Xueqi County. This was a tough nut to crack. It would not be as easy to take down as the previous 3 counties. If they wanted to take down Xueqi County, they had to concentrate their forces. Otherwise it would be too difficult. Qiguan Rang, Wei Ci, and Yang Si tacitly chose the captives they could use and sent them back to Fengyi County in batches. Most of the people were sent to mine, open up wastelands, build roads, or build houses. It would be a waste not to use free human resources. According to Jiang Pengji's previous plan, these captives would have a 6-month probation period. If they performed well, they might even be able to enter the Minton district under Wei Ci's jurisdiction. They would be allocated farmland and become a Minton soldier. They would be able to get 60% or 70% of the crops they grew. Of course, during the half-year probation period, Jiang Pengji also took care of their food and lodging, but she only cared about their food and did not care about their well-being. She did not pay them any salary. In order to appease the captives and prevent them from causing trouble on the way, these welfare conditions had been agreed upon in advance. However, the captives were still trembling with fear. They felt that Jiang Pengji's words were meant to deceive them. As the victor, it was fine that she did not kill the captives to reduce their rations. Would she be so kind as to take care of their food and lodging? With trepidation and fear for the outside world, these captives were sent to Fengyi County in batches. Su Ku and the others worked day and night, but before they could finish what they were doing, a large pile of official duties fell from the sky with the arrival of the captives. They had no choice but to grab able-bodied men everywhere to share the official duties. Otherwise, when Jiang Pengji returned from the battle, they would probably only see the lush weeds on their graves. The women's department in the government office had the most profound experience. Among them, there was a girl with a plump figure. She had lost a lot of weight in the past few days. She had gone from cute baby fat to a bony beauty. Not only that, but the supervisor of the women's department in the government office, Shangguan Wan, also grabbed Feng Jin's wife, Wei Jingxian, to be an able-bodied man. Wan'er's good sister. Anyway, Master Feng has allowed you to go out and broaden your horizons. This day will come sooner or later. Let's not be reserved. Wei Jingxian could not let go of the lively and active Chongqing, but she could not stand Shangguan Wan's constant pestering. Fortunately, Chongqing was obedient. She sat beside her seriously during the day and did not cry or make a fuss. When she was hungry,
she asked for food from the maids. When she was bored, she hugged her and nibbled on her feet or chubby little hands. She entertained herself and had fun. Even Wei Jingxian was grabbed for able-bodied men. What excuse did the others have for not working hard? Feng Zhan, who had always loved to have fun, was now so tired that even his occasional addiction had disappeared, not to mention drinking and finding beauties. Sure enough, he was busy for a while, then busy for a year. What 7 days off, eating, drinking, and having fun were all lies. Even on the night of the New Year, he hugged a stack of official documents to sleep. He was not a warm and fragrant lady. To prevent the captives from causing trouble, they were not gathered in one place. Instead, they were scattered and sent to different places. There were more than 30,000 captives. It sounded like a lot, but the number of people sent to different places was not that many. There was no need to worry about them causing trouble. When the gentry in Shangyang County heard the news, they all kept quiet out of fear. A strong sense of crisis spread in their hearts. If they caused less trouble, Feng Jin and Feng Zhan would naturally be much more relaxed. On the other side of the story, while Jiang Pengji was secretly promoting nursery rhymes, she was gathering her troops. She was valiantly and energetically marching towards Xueqi County. Excluding the troops stationed in the 3 counties, Jiang Pengji had only 8,000 elite troops at her disposal. With 8,000 troops, the Red Lotus Group in Xueqi County had 40,000 to 50,000 troops. It would be fine if the Red Lotus Group continued with their internal strife, but if they worked together to resist the foreign enemy, Jiang Pengji would have a hard time. The Red Lotus Group's troops were 5 to 6 times hers, and they had the advantage of defending the city. As the attacking party, she was at a great disadvantage. If the Red Lotus Group defended the city and did not come out, she could only retreat in defeat in the end. It was not that she had too few troops to defeat them, but that she had too little time. There was a deadline for rescuing the emperor, and she could not afford to delay it. However, if the Red Lotus Group continued with their internal strife, Jiang Pengji could take advantage of the situation. The military advisor of the Red Lotus Group had been fooled by Xueqi. He had finally sobered up from his rage. He immediately sent out an envoy to try to negotiate peace with the second-in-command. The most important thing now was to unite the forces of the Red Lotus Group and fight against the traitor Lu together. They should not allow the outsiders to take advantage of the internal strife. The second-in-command hesitated and did not agree immediately. Jiang Pengji was frowning in the tent. If the Red Lotus Group really unified and they were determined to defend the city and not leave, it would indeed be difficult. At that moment, the guard sent a message. Wei Ci was outside, requesting an audience. Jiang Pengji said calmly, "Invite him in." Wei Ci had come with a solution for Jiang Pengji. "I hope that my lord will allow me to persuade the rebels of the Red Lotus Group to surrender." Jiang Pengji's eyebrows twitched fiercely. Was he tired of living to persuade them at a time like this? She did not object immediately, but her expression showed that she did not agree. Wei Ci pursed his lips and did not speak. He looked straight into her eyes. Chapter 654. Jiang Pengji had thought that Wei Ci would back down, but she seemed to have underestimated this guy. He could be so stubborn. You should know very well what kind of people the Red Lotus Group is. You're going to lobby them at this time. Wei Zixiao, do you think your life is too long? The Red Lotus Group doesn't care about no killing of envoys when 2 armies clash. If I were in their shoes, I would be the first to kill whoever dares to send someone to lobby me at this juncture. Jiang Pengji's voice fluctuated a little. She asked, "Are you really not afraid of death?" Wei Ci smiled instead of getting angry. His expression softened a lot, as if he had a soft light filter. He said, "Of course I'm afraid." It was human nature to be afraid of death. Even though Wei Ci had been reborn, every time he thought of the scene of him drawing his sword to commit suicide, he still felt a trembling fear. However, if he could turn back time once, he would still choose to do so. Life was indeed precious, but to Wei Ci, some things were more important than it. It's good that you're afraid. Take good care of your life. Jiang Pengji didn't even look up. She gestured for Wei Ci to leave. Wei Ci said, "It's precisely because I'm afraid that my life and the lives of the people are worthy of respect. I am confident that I can convince the enemy leader." If I succeed, the casualties of our soldiers will be greatly reduced. It's true that my lord is brave and good at fighting. There are few opponents in the world, but the enemy has a large number of troops and the city walls as a barrier. They can advance to attack and retreat to defend. If they defend the city and deliberately delay time, even my lord will have a big headache. While the enemy is still divided, I think that sowing discord and instigating defection is the best way. At present, the Red Lotus group was still divided and hostile. They still had a chance. If the Red Lotus group put aside their former enmity and joined forces to fight against the enemy, Jiang Pengji's side couldn't afford to delay at all. They needed to seize the opportunity to fight a war, and the same was true of strategy. If they delayed for a while and the Red Lotus group became harmonious, it would be too late. Jiang Pengji was a little annoyed. She pondered for a while and finally made a decision. If you can guarantee that you'll come back alive, I'll allow you to try. Wei Si's face was filled with joy. Even his eyes were a little brighter. However, the audience in the streaming room was going crazy. Beauty Ci is out of her mind and wants to court death. Host, how can you not stop her? AID not enough. The Red Lotus group is a group of bandits. They don't have the habit of not killing envoys when two armies cross swords. If they see that Samiran is good-looking but not strong in martial arts, what if they develop crooked thoughts? Host, why didn't you stop him to the end? Who wants to add drama? The streamer has taken over 3 territories of the Red Lotus group. They hate the streamer to the core now. If Beauty Ci goes over, won't he be a ready-made punching bag? If it were any other force, I wouldn't be very worried. However, if it were the Red Lotus group, I would be very nervous. This chapter's message. The key is that Wei Ci wants to go. The host tried to stop him, but he was determined. What do you expect the host to do? The viewers in the streaming room were worried about Jiang Pengji. But she would not make decisions for him just because she was worried. Perhaps her worry seemed to Wei Ci that she didn't trust his abilities, so when Wei Ci insisted, she chose to respect him. After obtaining permission, Wei Ci changed into a simple and plain Confucian robe and left the military camp with only a few guards. That night, the second-in-command got up from his concubine in irritation. He was about to call for hot water to take a bath when the footsteps of a messenger came from outside. Second-in-command, there is a group of people outside who claim to be messengers sent by Lu Shi. They want to discuss important matters with you. The second-in-command was halfway through putting on his clothes when he froze on the spot. After a while, he reacted and revealed a malicious smile. Lu Shi actually sent people over. Interesting. Interesting. I want to see who is so unafraid of death. Let them in. I'll go over right away. The second-in-command took a battle bath and changed into a new set of clothes. He tidied himself up and went to meet the messengers sent by Lu Shi. When he entered the main hall, he saw a young man in a dark green Confucian robe sitting on the table. His sitting posture was standard and his back was straight. The hall was brightly lit. The candlelight swayed and the light flickered. The young man's long dark hair was tied into a jade crown. He was meticulous, and the color of his hair made his already delicate skin look even fairer. His eyebrows were straight, his eyes were like dots of paint, and the bridge of his nose was high. No matter who saw him, they would praise him. What a handsome gentleman with red lips and white teeth. The young man seemed to have sensed movement outside the hall. He looked in the direction of the sound. Seeing the fierce-looking second-in-command, he looked calm. It was as if he was not in the enemy's camp, but in his own courtyard. He was drinking alone at a table. The second-in-command gathered his thoughts and strode to the seat of honor. He sat down in a dignified manner and said in a thunderous voice, "You were sent by Lu Shi to persuade me?" He wanted to call Jiang Pengji Lu Shi, but the second-in-command did not know the young man's specific purpose, so he showed mercy. Wei Ci bowed and said calmly, "No, my lord sent me here to point out a way for you to survive." As soon as he opened his mouth, the second-in-command's murderous intent gradually surged. He sneered, "Point out a way for me to survive?" "Exactly." Wei Ci was not afraid at all. He said, "You are entrenched in Xueqi district and have 30,000 strong troops. You seem to be at the peak of your power, but don't forget that there are 2 strong enemies outside the city. Once the 2 besiege the city, how long do you think you can resist according to the reserves in the city?
If Wei Ci tried to persuade him and put himself in a lower position, the second-in-command would only be more arrogant and think more highly of himself. He was here to instigate the second-in-command. The two of them should be on equal footing. Therefore, even though he was in the enemy's camp, Wei Ci did not lower his aura at all. The second-in-command snorted. His eyes were as fierce as a wolf's. He stared at Wei Ci's neck, as if thinking of how to break it. The second-in-command was disdainful and said in a rough voice, "Although I have conflicts with the sacred sect, behind closed doors, we are all family. No matter what, Lu Shi is still an outsider. In this world, who would help an outsider instead of helping their own family?" Wei Ci said coldly, "Family? Are you referring to your own family who will be killed when the time comes?" The second-in-command's face turned green. Wei Ci continued, "You should thank my lord. If not for my lord, based on your rebellious behavior, how could the Red Lotus Group allow you to survive? What you said just now is right. Broken bones are still connected. How can a family have overnight hatred?" When it came to distorting the truth, the counselors under Jiang Pengji were all outstanding. Their ability to secretly change the concept was superb. It was clearly Jiang Pengji who had forced the Red Lotus Group to fall apart. In Wei Ci's words, Jiang Pengji had become a benefactor. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.